Greetings, one and all, and welcome to another edition of the Dinner Club Jamboree. I anticipate we should have other hosts trickling in throughout the evening as I see Joe coming in below now. Hello, Sister Danger, and hello, Joe.
Howdy.
Hello.
How's it going this week? All right? As I...
Oh, that's all right.
Good. Yeah, as you can see, I'm not in my normal environs. Uh-oh, hang on. I have to tell Jack off. Jack, you've got COVID. What the hell are you doing?
You got COVID? What?
I don't know what I have. I haven't gotten a test.
Oh, man. Can you still smell things?
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm just tired and achy and mainly tired.
You were vaccinated, though, right? You had a vaccine, though, right?
Yeah, I've had 3.
Yes, yeah, so that's like supposed to, reduce it quite a lot. But, well, that's good. I mean, hopefully that's all it is. It's just,
Is it the same situation where you are, where you can't get a test for love or money?
It's pretty hard.
It takes a few days here.
Yeah, I called a bunch of Walgreens to see if they had tests, and nobody had any tests. And like going into a a clinic or whatever, Zoom care, it's like $160, which I don't have. So.
Wow, that's crazy. I mean, the thing is here, very close to me, 5-10 minutes from my house, on a major artery, we have a free thing that you can go in, you can walk in, and there's no charge.
Oh, that's good. We probably have something like that here. I just haven't found it. I have to do more research. I mean,
a lot of the free testing sites have hours-long automobile lines and stuff that you have to wait in. And
we'll see the one over here. I mean, like, the Trupuka, Philip, he went there, and like a friend of mine went, and basically she called ahead to find out what the line was, and they were like, oh, we have no line, and she zoomed up there and was in and out in 10 minutes.
Wow, that's pretty cool. It should be that way everywhere.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. If you have sufficient testing places, there won't be any lines.
Oh. Sorry,
well, Jack, don't feel that you have to soldier through, Jack. If you feel rough, man,
Yeah, I mean, I have a big jug of orange juice, so
fair enough.
We'll see.
Well, Candace Owens says that you should be drinking colloidal silver. So.
Oh yeah.
No. Totally. Oh my God, no! What?
Yeah, Candace Owens was saying that she drinks colloidal silver, and that's why she knows she's never had COVID.
Okay. I know what colloidal silver is, and that's ridiculous. And also, who's Candace Williams? This came up in the last show too, and I was
Candace
like,
Owens. She's the former SJW who became like ultra right wing.
Yeah, she found there was more money in being a right wing stooge than being an SJW. So,
yeah,
a lot more money.
I forgot about it too.
Especially see now here's the thing. She did discover a burgeoning market for black and brown people, because the right wing loves black and brown stooges who will justify and rationalize all their bigotry.
Yeah, they have to have their token black person, basically.
Exactly. So, and Stacey Dash got she got tossed aside.
It's ridiculous.
The funny thing is, I did a video and about Black History Month, and I addressed some things that Stacey Dash specifically said. I actually linked her the video. I'm sure she never watched it. And I told her then, I said, when you're no longer useful, they will drop you, and that's exactly what happened, because that's what they do.
Yeah.
And then she came back pleading, "Can I be black again? Can I be black again?" And we were like, nah, we don't need you.
Sister Danger, your setup looks really nice this week.
It does? Wait,
yeah.
What? What are we talking about here? My
we
background?
got colors in the background, yeah.
Yeah. Just in general. I don't know. I wasn't here last week, so I don't know what the heck happened.
I guess it just means you can see it.
Yeah, just your setup looks nice.
Thanks. Oh, yeah, that's my regular background, except for my screen is open instead of that will just flip out and close. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it lets the light in better, and then you can see the cool. I always feel like I can't see my own LED lights, and that makes me sad because I have them there so I can see them. So
Right.
Also, the headset's giving you kind of a Princess Leia kind of vibe.
These are not new. I love them. I love them, except for that they're actually too big for me. I got a new pair, a Bluetooth pair, for Christmas that are actually kids, and then they have like super on the side is like crazy lights. It's awesome. But they're little kids headsets, and those fit me. Like these ones actually, they are too far down. Like they're right on the inside, like they're on the top of my ear, because the top is like this would be good if but they don't get any smaller.
So what you're saying is your head is a funny shape.
My head is very small. I can wear children's sunglasses a lot of the time. My face is very narrow right here.
Some might even say elfin.
Some might, as a matter of fact. Yeah, no, but thank you. I mean, that's thanks. So the screen actually was all hand painted by an artist from one of the events that I work. So, and I'm sorry I wasn't like, my head is not, I need to get my head in the game here. I was just like working before I was trying to do Excel, and I'm trying to do formulas in Excel at a level that I've not done them before. And I mean, Excel coding is its own thing. And so it's a lot of looking things up and cross-referencing and trying to figure out and I haven't figured it out. It's frustrating me. So
when you said she was elfin, I'm like thinking you've met me, Paula. I'm decidedly not elfin.
Well, you're a couple pounds overweight, Joe.
Couple pounds, yeah, more ogreish than elfish.
Yeah. No, anyway. So has anybody got any burning issues that you'd like to discuss to open up the conversation tonight?
A few. So one, that's, well, depending on your perspective, maybe less weighty than the other one. Probably, I watch a few law channels on YouTube. And one channel I like a lot is Leto's Law. And they talked about a case where this happened recently. So the police were looking for this guy. He's a 49-year-old white dude that's 5'11". And they arrested a 5'7", 23-year-old black man because they had like similar names. And he kept saying, like, I'm not the guy. And the thing that really makes it worse is if you look at the guy who they were looking for, his rap sheet, he has crimes that predate this black dude that before that guy was born. But he spent 6 days in jail because no one wanted to listen to him and no one bothered. Like, they have the same first and last name, but different middle names and certainly different dates of birth. And they just refused to even look at that stuff to verify that they had the right guy. And I was like, wow. I mean, I know, that takes the, fitting a description to a whole new, low level.
Because he didn't fit the description, did he?
No, he did not in the slightest, but yet, and they refused. And I'm thinking he really came down to cops were like, they're just so convinced that black people are criminal that they didn't even give a damn if he was the guy or not. And it was only because his lawyer actually went to a judge and was like, here's the mugshot of the guy you're looking for. Here's my guy. They're nothing alike. So, and then the judge was like, oh yeah, okay. Immediately was like, yeah, sorry, you're free to go. But it shouldn't have taken 6 days to get to that point.
Oh, right. It just reminded me, I was watching Good Times the other days. I've been going through the reruns on Amazon. And I used to love that show when I was a kid. And there's a 2-part episode where JJ gets arrested. And JJ gets arrested because he went to a liquor store and bought some certs, for fresh breath. Remember that? Does anybody remember certs, or am I that old?
Yeah.
Anyway,
with Retson.
Yeah. Anyway, so he was running out of the liquor store. He was late for his date, so he started running down the street, and he got arrested because they thought he robbed the liquor store. And they said, you fit the description of the person who robbed the store. And of course, it's just a fictional TV show, but they're trying to make a point. And JJ's what, 6'3", and weighs about 120, right? And anyway, it turned out that they caught the guy who did it, so to let JJ out. And the guy was about 5'6", but he was also black, and therefore that's close enough.
Yeah, yeah. Black male between the ages of 7 and 97, between 4 foot nothing and 8 feet, between 68 and 600 pounds.
Well, this is why, when it says when a police officer says you match the description of someone that we're looking for, I mean, how general is the description? I mean, like you just say, if you're looking, even if you don't even have to say black male, but even if you say just a general description, white male, 25 to 30 years old, 5'9" to 6 foot tall, you've just described, a huge proportion of white males, right? And that's not really a description. That's not a description. Those are a few data points. That's not a description. If I was to describe my friend Jack below me and didn't mention the fact that he had a beard or a mustache, I haven't properly described Jack.
Right. Well, that was the other thing too. The guy they were looking for, the white dude they were looking for, had a beard and a mustache, and the black dude was clean shaven. And also, the guy, because he's 49, his beard was gray. And I was like, you guys didn't even try. You didn't fucking try. And it just it when you see stuff okay, I got pulled over I think I mentioned this once before. I got pulled over for a bad taillight, but the thing was, the cop, he followed me for like 2 miles, and then he started to pull past me, and I thought, oh, he's not gonna give me a hard. And I didn't know my tail was out. I literally just came from the mechanic, going on my way to work. And he drives up even with me, and then he pulls me over. And then he comes up to my car, got his hand on his gun, snaps off, and I'm thinking, and that's never happened to me before. Not even the time where I was on a dark street, but it was well lit, but it was a nighttime, and I didn't turn my headlights on because I didn't realize, because it was so bright out. And I'm driving down the street, and a cop literally drove in front of me because he thought I was doing a drive-by or something. Even that cop didn't come up to me with his his hand on his gun. And that would have made a lot of sense, he thought I was gonna go start shooting people. But he starts shouting at me, and again he's saying he mentioned the description, and again some dude in Florida. He's like, well, no, no, I haven't been to Florida. I don't even know what the fuck he's talking about. And then, of course, because he had there was no good reason to pull me. Then he writes me the ticket for the tail light out without even telling me why. I'm like, it's a tail light. Usually don't give you a ticket for that. They just tell you, hey, go get your tail light fixed. But he had to get me on something, But yeah, so that was the first thing, and then the other thing was Ukraine and the pending Russian invasion.
Well, that's something I do want to do a bit of a deeper dive on. Where do you want to start?
Well, basically, I guess here's what I was thinking. I spent some time looking at what military forces that the Ukrainians had, and they didn't really give details in the Russians. They just said there's 100,000 troops. So I wanted to see, was 100,000 enough to actually knock over the country, assuming equal training on both sides. They actually turned out the Ukrainian ground forces are a lot bigger than I thought. 100,000 in and of itself, air power aside, wouldn't be enough. However, the Russians have way more air power available than the Ukrainians do. So that's one of those force multipliers that could change that thing. And so right now NATO is really trying to figure out what to do, because technically speaking, Ukraine is not in NATO, and that's part of Russia's contention is they want a guarantee that we won't allow them in NATO, and they actually want us to kick some of the other nations that are close to Russia out, which that's not going to happen.
When the Eastern Bloc threw off its Russian oppressors, and then the Soviet Union shortly after that failed, or whatever you want to call it, I would call it failing. Mm-hmm. The government of Boris Yeltsin and Bill Clinton negotiated that states like Georgia, Ukraine, Belarus, and others were not going to be invited to join NATO. That was the trade-off. We'll let these become democracies, and we're not going to clobber them. Just don't let them join NATO. And that was an agreement, I thought. So, but if it was never written down as a treaty, then I guess maybe, I don't know. But I mean, it was my understanding at the end of the Cold War, in quotation marks, that the agreement was the satellite, what do we used to call them, the Iron Curtain countries could go ahead and have their democracy as long as we didn't fold them into NATO. So if that's true, that means that the United States and its European allies would be reneging on a promise if they invited Ukraine or Georgia or anybody else into NATO. So I understand the Russians' reticence about it. On the other hand, they already took Crimea 5 years ago and got away with it. Nothing's going to stop them from doing it again.
Right.
You know, this is, in my opinion, they're just waiting for the moment when Joe Biden looks at his absolute weakest, and then they're going to go.
Yeah, and that's my concern. I mean, the thing is, basically now, my feeling is that if we don't want if we don't want Ukraine to get invaded, then the only way to keep that from happening is that the United States and the rest of NATO needs to risk possible war with Russia to avoid a war with Russia. Because I think that if we were to, like I said, the Ukrainian ground forces are probably good enough to handle themselves, but they don't have enough air power. So if we sent an air wing there and operated out of their bases and maybe out of Turkey as well, if the Turks allow it, and say, okay, look, we're going to help defend Ukraine, then they're not going. I think there's very little chance that, I won't say zero chance, but I'll say there's very little chance that Putin would be that stupid to go in. He doesn't really want to fight us. He wants to, basically take things easily, like you said. Like if we just sit back and do nothing, sure, he's going to take it. And so I kind of feel like if it's kind of like a very similar situation to what happened with Chamberlain and Hitler, where basically, Hitler was like, well, they take the Sudetenland and we do nothing, and then they invade Poland and we do nothing, and eventually it reaches a point where,
well, we didn't do nothing when they took Poland. That's when we declared war.
Oh, right, yeah, but there were a couple
just being clear.
Yeah.
They took Austria. They took the Czech Republic. They took a few places.
So they took a bunch of places, and even there, even once they declared, Britain and France declared war, once they went into Poland, there's a period called Sitzkrieg, where basically the Allies did very little. At one point, the French actually did occupy the Rhineland, and then they left because at the time the Germans, they were still building their forces, and they had everything in the east, they had nothing in the west. So the French actually occupied the Rhineland, and there's actually a film of French troops, dancing around in German territory, and then they packed up their shit and went home.
Sure. But as regards the Ukraine, though, Joe, I mean, I don't see any good resolution to this situation whatsoever. And I am actually worried about a new sort of like Eastern Iron Curtain developing over the medium term, because Russia, the situation was always the same during the Cold War, but those satellite states were already securely under Russian authority, and therefore they didn't feel the threat. But the thing is now, in the 70s, the Russians, well, I mean, I'm wrong because they did it to Afghanistan. I was about to say they didn't just wantonly decide, hey, I'm going to go and invade this neighbor country and take over all their shit. But actually, that's not true. But the point is that they got away with it in Afghanistan. Carter made loads of threats. We boycotted the 1980 Olympics. It didn't stop the Soviets from doing it. The Afghanis stopped the Soviets from doing it by kicking them the hell out after 10 years of wasted occupation.
Yeah, the difference now, one thing that, as far as where Russia's at, I mean, basically, all those former Soviet bloc countries are all in NATO with the exception of the Ukraine and Belarus. So I would say that there's not as much for them to take, but I guess the question is, and maybe we are. I mean, I'm not. Again, I don't know that I have a good answer. But basically, is, are we willing to sacrifice Belarus and Ukraine to the Russians? Maybe we are. I don't know. And maybe that's the right thing to do.
The uncomfortable answer is that the United States will let it go, rather than have a head-on force, hot war with a nuclear armed power. And I think because they know that, that's why it's going to happen. I just think they're buying for time. I just want to say hi, Brian. How's it going?
Hey, Brian.
Hello.
Question I have for you. Sorry, go ahead.
Is my volume okay?
You sound good, Brian.
Okay, cool.
So I guess the question.
Reason I ask is because I've been messing around with all sorts of things, trying to get the studio sorted out and everything. So I just need to check on each platform.
Right.
Okay.
So
Sorry,
question.
you have a question?
Yeah. Well, the question I had actually for everybody really is: should we help defend Ukraine or not? In your opinion?
In my opinion, I'm gonna have to think about it for a minute, because I've only joined. I only caught the tail end of what you're saying.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I'll answer a little bit. I mean,
Before you do, though,
I'm against interventions, but military assistance is not the same thing as military intervention. You know, we weren't assisting Saddam Hussein when we went into Iraq. We're invading his country. Do you know what I mean? So I make that distinction anyway, which is why I'm not automatically going, hell no, we shouldn't go in, right? But I mean, it really depends on the situation at the time. I mean, because they're gonna go. Everybody knows they're gonna go. In the same way that 10 years ago, everybody knew Hillary Clinton was gonna run for president. Everybody knows the Russians are gonna go. You know, it's the Ukrainians certainly know.
Oh yeah. So I guess the question though is, do you think that there's anything we can do that would change the Russians' mind about going in? I think there is. Although I understand I could be wrong, but I personally think that if we showed the willingness to put forces, and actually did put forces in Ukraine, I think it's very unlikely that the Russians would actually attack at that point.
You really think that?
Yeah. Right. So the whole thing is, in my opinion, what Putin's trying, he's going for easy pickings. He knew we really weren't going to fight over the Crimea. So he put the feelers out there. We didn't move. And then he did the same thing. And actually, so we mentioned Saddam Hussein. Same thing happened with Kuwait. I mean, basically, Hussein telegraphed that move to the Bush administration, and the Bush administration took a very hands-off policy. And so he figured, oh, I'm free and clear. And so he went and did it. And then, of course,
I'm sure did what now?
Invasion of Kuwait.
Kuwait, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So he basically got tacit approval from the Bush administration. You know, wasn't explicit, but he got kind of a wink and a nod, and he said, all right, great. So he was kind of blindsided when Bush went out there and was like, we're going to kick him out and blah, 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 because he was like, dude, because he was our bud. Remember, he was our bud against Iran. So he was kind of blindsided that we said, hey, get out. And then he didn't believe us when we said we're going to kick him out. And then,
it was my understanding that he was given a nod and a wink approval to invade Kuwait.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah, and so my understanding was that the Iraqis were quite surprised when George Bush decided to make it the issue he made it. I don't know when it comes, and this is why I have no pride in my country when it comes to our dealings with countries sort of east of Turkey, pretty much, because I just don't. I can't imagine how any country like I say, east of Turkey, certainly between Turkey and China, I can't imagine how any of them could honestly think of America as an honest broker, as someone whose word could be trusted and whose interests were humanitarian as opposed to national.
Right. I mean, looking at the Europe map of NATO, let me bring it up here. So, as far as stuff that borders Russia, the only things left are Ukraine, Belarus, and then
Belarus is not a small country for a European country. It's pretty big.
No, physically large. And then there's a sliver or something east of Romania, and I don't remember my geography well enough to remember what that is. It was
Moldova.
Moldova, thank you. And then Croatia is in, but Serbia is not. But yeah, I mean, Greece is in, Albania is in, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Croatia, Slovenia, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland are all in NATO now.
I didn't know that Slovakia and the Czech Republic were part of NATO.
Yep. And look, I could understand that, whether there was a handshake agreement or not, I could understand the Russians going, hey, you guys are getting awfully close, you know, because well, particularly because we're the Baltic countries, so Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are all in NATO.
Well, the United States was prepared to threaten World War III over nuclear weapons in Cuba, 58 years ago. So,
Yep.
I think the Russians are justifiably, and what is often not really widely discussed, because I only know about this because I saw a secret history documentary about it. But yeah, we had short range nuclear missiles in Turkey at the same time. And so behind the scenes, the Kennedy administration and Khrushchev administration were negotiating and said, we're not going to announce we're going to take our missiles out of Turkey. We'll just do it. You announce you're getting your missiles out of Cuba, and we'll both declare victory. And that's pretty much how it worked out. But I mean, that's a good example of how you can't have that kind of negotiation in public.
Right. Because basically, Russia needed something. And basically, Khrushchev's, look, I can't pull these out unless I got something else to offer to the
the generals,
or else I'm dead. I'm done. I'm done. I need to save some way to save face. And he's like, all right. So Kennedy's like, all right, we'll take I think Pluton missiles, but I can't remember. Oh, Jupiter missiles out of Turkey, and yeah, Brian.
Yeah, there is one thing about the whole situation with Russia that has always puzzled me. Now, wind back to World War II, because we mentioned that as being essentially. We all know that's essentially when the West fell out with Russia for various reasons. The Iron Curtain was erected, and the Cold War started. Now, one thing that's always bothered me about that is the speed at which Russia went from an integral part of Europe, a natural ally, to being the number one threat to Western civilization. Now, it occurs to me, and this may be controversial, it may be, I don't know, it may be impossible, I don't know. But one thing that Trump said when he took office that I actually agreed with was getting along with Russia would be a good thing. And I'm wondering if maybe the solution to this is, rather than taking, an aggressive, defensive, militaristic action, or stance, whether we try and actually start to get on with Russia. Yeah.
Well, so
because we have bigger global concerns to worry about than who's politically pissing off who, and and whether or not we're going to just add to our problems by having a World War III.
Okay, that sounds very nice, Brian, but you're taking the position that we haven't tried that already.
No, I'm not saying that we haven't tried it. Yeah, I'm just saying it would be good if we could actually make some progress in that direction.
I hear what you're saying about the wisdom and of trying to keep your enemies from becoming so hostile that they actually attack you. I mean, you can be adversaries with someone and never have an actual fight, and I think that that's an important point to make. But I mean, and I'm not directing this at you, Brian, even though you were sort of quoting Trump. I'm actually referencing this at Trump and people who say that we need to get along with Russia. I mean, to me, that's like water is wet or fire is hot, or, I mean, it's, of course we need to get along with everybody. You know what I mean? I mean, it's but getting along with people necessitates the other party wanting to get along as well.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Right? That's one part. And the other thing is getting along with people also necessitates that you're willing to give stuff up. And I'm not sure as regards to the relationship with the United States and Russia, how to strike that balance. But more to the point is because it's the personality issue because when he might have been a bit of a buffoon or considered to be such, but Boris Yeltsin, when he was president of Russia, there was a reasonably decent working relationship with Western countries while Yeltsin was president. Ever since Vladimir Putin took over, Russia has developed a more aggressive posture that has gotten more aggressive as time has gone on. Right. So I think it's I don't get me wrong. I don't wish harm on anybody, but there needs to be some selective lightning strikes in this world. That's all I've got to say.
Yeah, well, and see, that's the thing. That's what I was going to get to with Ryan is that, well, again, when Yeltsin was there, we actually had a very good working relationship with the Russians, and things were looking very positive. But right now, basically, since Putin's been in there, it's been impossible. Not because we were unwilling, because he is unwilling. So
yeah, I hear what you're saying.
And basically, and even going back further, I mean, one thing, when you're wondering like where it started really what became apparent was the Berlin blockade. So we got to remember what happened. So basically, after World War II, Germany was broken up into 4 sectors, and then Berlin itself was also broken up into 4 sectors, and each one, the Brits had one, the French had one, the United States had one, and Russia had one. That was applied both to the country and the city of Berlin. At a certain point, that was supposed to go away, and we were supposed to turn control back to the Germans. And Russia said, we're not going anywhere. And because Berlin sat in the East German part, so basically at that point it was like, well, so if they keep that, then they basically wanted to take Berlin. So and they basically blockaded, because the way it was, that there was a route that the rest of the forces could basically drive supplies down a road into Berlin.
The corridor.
So once the corridor was closed, so the Berlin blockade basically was like a constant airlift that was literally like just round the clock, bringing supplies and stuff and extra troops and everything to defend the American, British, and French sectors of the city, so it wouldn't fall to the Russians. So this is something, and this was if I recall, I'm pretty sure Stalin was still alive at this point. So this is something Russia initiated. So it's a shame that he did that, but unfortunately, Stalin had designs, and we knew even during the war, Russia was a co-belligerent. They were not an ally, and we knew that at the time. This is the reason why Patton.
Yeah, that's fair.
Patton actually wanted, when the Germans fell, he actually wanted to arm the Germans against the Russians, and he actually wanted to start a war with the Russians right then and there, and that's one of the reasons why he was relieved of command.
MacArthur also, didn't he get sacked by the president because he wanted to nuke Russia before Russia's nuclear capabilities matched our own? He thought he wanted to make the case that if we crush them now, they won't be a threat later.
Actually, it was during the Korean War. He wanted to nuke China, because China, basically what happened is, when North Korea invaded South Korea, they pushed down all the way to the Pusan perimeter, and then MacArthur devised the Incheon landing, which is like basically in the middle of the country, and that cut off a lot of the North Korean forces from supply. And then the UN forces pushed all the way back right near the Chinese border. And if we just stopped there, we would have been okay. But of course, MacArthur, being the blowhard he pushed us up into the mountains, and then that's when 800,000 Chinese crossed the border, destroyed 10th Infantry, the 10th Corps, and pushed back, and then there was the seesaw. So he wanted to nuke the Chinese, and not only did he want to, and of course he was a blowhard. He was talking a lot to the media, and when Truman told him, "No, I'm not letting you nuke the Chinese because I don't want to start a bigger conflict than it already is," MacArthur went to the media and started openly bad mouthing Truman's decision,
right,
and saying, "Well, if you give me like 5 nukes and I'll end this war." And then that's when Truman's like, sorry, you don't, you work for people, and you're gonna, we got to get rid of you.
And imagine that's obviously before the television age really kicked off, and before the more modern media age. And you imagine what would have happened, or what the kind of drama that would have ensued. Say, for example, if George W. Bush sacked, I don't know, Schwarzkopf at right after Iraq was considered to be won, or imagine if Schwarzkopf wanted to go into Iran, and then I don't know, it's a similar sort of thing, you know what I mean? It's like where the general's got a little bit too big for his boots, and when you have a 5-star general questioning the authority of the president, that person's got to go.
They got to go, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you've got a commander in chief and the sort of structure that you have over there in the States, that you just described, if there is an immediate warranted sacking, that would be it. It's like your commander in chief has made a decision, he's sent the orders down the line, and you're standing there saying, "No, Mr. President, you're wrong. I'll do it my way." Sorry, you got to go, pal. That's not how the system works. That's not how it's structured.
Damn right. And good thing it doesn't work that way, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So Paige McLaughlin in the chat says, do people know about Russia's dead hand system and doomsday device of hydrogen bombs salted with cobalt that could make intense, long-lasting radiation that could end humanity? No, never heard of that. Sounds kind of like Dr. Strangelove.
Yep.
And as far as ending humanity is concerned, it only takes an exchange of 25 nukes per side for two sides to fight, and we would have a nuclear winter. I mean, it wouldn't take a huge exchange. We do not have to unload our entire arsenal to provoke a nuclear winter. And nuclear winter, even if we didn't die from the radiation and irradiated foods and all the human mutations and everything like that, will change the climate irreparably for literally centuries. And it's not like climate change where you can slowly live your way through it. I'd rather die than have to live through a nuclear winter.
Yeah, we're talking an extinction event, mass extinction event.
Yeah, because crops would die.
And not just the crops, but you'd also lose a lot of the natural vegetation. Forests would go.
The animals that fertilize
animals,
the crops, everything.
Exactly. The flora, the fauna, everything. It would just go, and the only thing that you'd be left with, essentially, is the smallest and hardiest of critters that can essentially live underground, basically.
Yeah, I mean,
underground. Yeah,
you wouldn't wipe off all, right? You wouldn't wipe off everything, but
the oceans, a lot of that would be fine. It'd just be the top surface.
Yeah, I mean, basically, all the stuff that supports humans would pretty much collapse. And I don't know that humans necessarily all would all go, but we'd be reduced dramatically, probably by 95, 90, somewhere between 95 and 99%.
Yeah, we'd probably what was left of us would probably evolve into I don't know, some sort of strange marsupial. No, not marsupial. We can't do that. Some sort of strange monkeyoid type thing.
I would prefer. I would prefer it if human beings literally went extinct and some other primate arose and had a chance at conquering this world and doing it right. You know what I mean? Bring on the meerkats.
To be honest, I think in that event, I think all the primates would probably have had it. I think it would probably be either another chance for the lizards. Or maybe even the insects, because I think a lot of the avians would go as well.
Well, yeah, it's about the insects. I mean, yeah, and look, the surface has been an arthropod world before,
right?
Yeah, and of course, let's not rule out the possibility of something else crawling out of the oceans.
Now, one thing I did find out though within the last couple of years, when it comes to the radiation, is that the radiation, most of it actually doesn't last all that long. Because the thing is that bombs that have high intense radiation during the blast, Well, that's just it. They kind of burn them. They kind of use up everything pretty quick. And the only radiation that's left is there are things that get irradiated, and there's also some decomposition products that'll last for a little bit. But if you actually look at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that didn't take that long to get back down to normal. A few years to get back down to normal radiation levels. But
tiny bombs by comparison to modern bombs.
Right, but the chemistry is still the same though. The issue though is that the problem is like you said, the nuclear winter is it's not that the place is going to be a radiated wasteland. It's like everything will have died or most things will have died from the nuclear winter.
Well, and as you said before, I mean, because the nuclear winter will be snowing, I should say, radiated particles down on everything. Every crop will be radiated. You know what I mean? Every animal will be radioactive.
That's why I say, the top levels of the ocean as well. You're going to get a lot of extinction there.
And this is one of the reasons why there are multiple vaults around the world with seeds of various plants. The idea being that if there's a catastrophe, whether it's a nuclear war or comet strike or anything like that, that if anybody can actually get to it after the fact, that they actually have some non-irradiated seeds, and they're in like lead-lined bunkers and the whole deal.
That's great, but it does rely on somebody surviving to be able to put them back into the wild. Otherwise, you're waiting one heck of a time for the lead-sealed bunkers and everything else to degrade so that they will naturally redisperse. And I think something else will have evolved by then.
I wonder if those places have a lock release system. Can you imagine, like, you get there, you find the place, and then the doors are locked?
Yeah. Well,
then you have to go in search of a bomb, basically, to blow it up because they're so fortified.
Now, here's something that's kind of a sobering and very kind of sad thought. We know from a variety of different things that command structure of a number of different countries do have shelters that could survive, any of those things, nuclear war, comet strike, or whatever. So the people that are most likely to survive anything like that are politicians. And it's like, oh, great, that's what's going to repopulate the planet. It's fucking politicians.
Yeah, it puts me in mind of that scene from Douglas Adams in The Hitchhiker's Guide, the Golga Phrygians, where they crash land on a planet, and it's basically the planet's getting populated with hairdressers and telephone sanitizers,
middle managers and yoga instructors. Yeah,
exactly.
That's the beginning of the second book. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the end of the first bit. It's okay, we got back to Earth, but it's like 2 million years in the past, and the native primates basically get wiped out by these middlemen and hairdressers. And
they decided they couldn't agree on what to make money out of, so they decided to make it out of leaves, and that way money would grow on trees. But of course, inflation ran wild.
So they started this defoliation program.
I think that if it was me, I would perhaps first try to find some manner of way to martially / fortify myself. Like weapons, guns, whatever it is, right? Myself and maybe whoever I'm with, and then I would try to gather as many women to me as possible, because there is no procreation at that point without women. And then I would absolutely assert the power of womanhood if you want to survive, period. Do you want your family line? Do you want a family line? All right, you can come and negotiate with us, bitches. We're having your children. So
basically going back to the Neolithic or the Paleolithic.
I mean, I don't actually know, because I never have paid much.
Back then,
I don't pay enough attention to keep, like, this was 50,000 years ago and this was 150,000.
Well,
a long time ago.
Prehistory and even some of the early history, women actually did hold a lot of sway and a lot of power, albeit behind the scenes in the latter centuries.
Yeah. Yeah, was it Louis C.K. before he disgraced himself? He had this thing about that? He was talking about way back, women had more power, they used to flick our penises and everything. And then one day someone realized, wait, when power, and she cried like, wait, we can hit them, and then it all fell apart. Yeah. We're bigger than them, we can hit them.
You totally can, but if we have guns, we can shoot you back at range.
That's true. Well, like I said, like once men started hitting women, everything got all fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it is kind of a natural evolutionary thing. I mean, yeah, the female of the species. You look at a lot of primates. Yeah, it's the alpha female that decides who gets to mate with who in the beta groups. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I have a I don't. It's not developed enough to call a theory. It's just like a surmise that, and based on like I said, with the fact women definitely had a more prominent role, and it makes sense, like you said, like the family, the basis of the family, the propagation of your tribe is that if the women all die, we're fucked. So we need, and because you don't need a lot of men. One guy can impregnate multiple women, so you women are supremely important. And I think somewhere it went from women being elevated to women becoming like, so we protect the women, but then they kind of become objectified. And then once they become objectified, then they started becoming commodity, becoming property, and then everything went downhill from there.
Well, that was the basis of the feudal system. Yeah, you solidified your and cemented your alliances by exchanging bloodlines, combining bloodlines.
That's the rhetoric, but how often did that really work? How many times did, let's just say, the king of Germany marry his daughter to the king of Spain, and then Spain and Germany go to war anyway? Do you know what I mean? I mean, stuff.
True. Yeah. True. But it worked quite well when you're consolidating smaller kingdoms. I mean, right. It was the basis of how this country sort of went from isolated clans into small kingdoms and then unified into larger kingdoms.
Well, yeah,
and ultimately
it was
one kingdom.
Been nationalized as a whole country for about 120 years.
Exactly. Exactly.
Perfect example to what you're talking about, Paul. Think of World War I. So you have King George, you have Kaiser Wilhelm, and you have Romanov in Russia. Tsar Nicholas. They were first cousins. Their grandmother was Queen Victoria. They're all first cousins, and they knew each other well from when they were younger.
Yep, and that goes back to my point. Yeah, only as far back as Victorian age. 100 years or so.
Right.
Russia, the Russian royalty, every royal in Europe was a relative of Queen Victoria.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why she was such a potent head of state for the empire, because she was essentially the matriarch of Europe.
You've just reminded me of something, Brian, and I've got multiple questions that I'd like to ask you specifically as my British counterpart on the show today, but I want all of us to discuss this more broadly as well. So there's a lot of royal gossip at the moment, right? Because obviously Prince Andrew was photographed 30 odd years ago with the 17-year-old girl on Brian Epstein's pleasure yacht or pleasure island or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. We talked a little bit about it last week. Anyway, I personally am completely and utterly, totally against the monarchy, right? I don't think there should be a monarchy. But I say this to my gal all the time because my gal's a huge monarchist. She loves that shit. She loves it more than any of her English friends, right? But anyway, what I want to know is
spit it out.
All this stuff has the potential to bring down the monarchy, right? Now, you dial the clock back 85, 90 years or whatever. You had Edward VIII had to abdicate the crown because he wanted to marry a divorced woman. Yeah. Right. Queen Elizabeth, the longest reigning monarch in British history, was not born to be queen. Neither was her father born to be king. But because of what happened with Edward VIII, here we are, right?
Yep.
Now, what really gets me is
wait, which Queen Elizabeth are you talking about?
The current Queen Elizabeth, Queen QE2, the modern monarch of the UK. Anyway,
neither of them were born to be queen, actually.
Yeah, she wasn't born to be queen.
Yeah, neither of them were, but we're talking about the second one.
Okay, I'm on the same page now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah. So, but what I want to know is, because I've always been amused when I used to live in the UK. One of my biggest tickles was you get a poll in the newspaper and it say 87% of Britons support the monarchy, and then right below that it'll be like 62% of people never want Charles to be king. Well, which way is it? Do you support the monarchy, or do you know what I mean? Because if you support the monarchy, Charles is going to be king, and there's no argument about it. You know what I mean?
Actually, they
don't support the monarchy, Brian. They support Queen Elizabeth.
Yes, they do. They support Queen Elizabeth. However, there was discussion. You mentioned Edward and Mr. Simpson. Now, when Charles and Diana divorced, and Charles married Camilla, there were huge discussions, long discussions, as to whether or not that would affect the lineage.
Yeah, and I saw Charles himself say on TV, well, King Henry VIII created the Church of England so that he could marry again after divorce. So
exactly. So there is mixed precedent here. Now, what's just happened to Andrew is very interesting. Yeah, because he's affected. Well, he wasn't born to be monarch anyway. Yeah, to use your phrasing. Now, one of the reasons why Elizabeth is not stepping down, as she has every right, and some would say deserves to live to live her years out free of all of that shit, and her responsibilities, such as they are. But the reason why she will not step down is because she knows just how bad Charles would be as a monarch for this country.
Do you think it's because he would be bad as a monarch, or do you think it's because there's already built in, they must see the polling and they know that Charles doesn't have the wide support of the British public that's enjoyed by his mother?
That would factor into it in a second. That would factor into it. But yes, he would be a poor monarch. There are discussions have been discussions recently. Who was it? Miles Power on YouTube did a video recently discussing exactly how bad for the country Charles would be. I recommend people go and watch it. But summarize, Charles is not supposed to be interfering in government. Royalty is not supposed to be interfering in government. And there is a growing body of evidence that
doing it for
Charles,
years that I'm aware of.
Well, he did it with Blair, and that's going back a ways.
Yeah.
So and he's also had a bit of a shall we say mixed adverse effect on the national health system, because it is as a direct result of his intervention that things like homeopathy and other alternate quackery
are part of the NHS.
Are now part of the NHS.
Let Sister Danger have a go. She's been holding her tongue.
Yes.
I just have a question. Considering that the British monarchy are really only kind of supposed to be philanthropic figureheads that run around and shake hands, kiss babies, and raise a lot of money, I guess, via ish. But like you said, they're not supposed to be participating in government. So with that said, what actually makes a good or a bad monarch at that point, to the point that it would be even a concern about who the next king is? Like, what's he gonna do, right?
Okay, Okay.
I can answer that
but before you do, just to clarify, Charles is not allowed to because he is Prince of Wales.
Right.
The monarch does play a role in government, albeit advisory, and when there are certain decisions to be made that can constitutionally can only be made by the monarch, then there's a role to play there. And it's those decisions, it's those interactions that Charles would be very detrimental for, because all of his woo would suddenly become British politics.
Right. I was just going to say, Sister Danger, that, I mean, two things. First of all, you said that you could support the government but not want Trump to be president, in reference to how can people support the monarchy but not want Charles to be king. Supporting the monarchy means you support the system of monarchy, which is inherited. Trump didn't inherit the presidency. We don't inherit, we don't keep presidents around forever.
It doesn't mean you have to like your king. Like, no, that's all I'm saying.
But you have to, if you believe in the monarchy, you believe in a system of inherited power. You can't separate the two things. So inherited power means Charles will be king, and
that doesn't mean they have to like it though.
I haven't looked at polling over the past 10 years, but back in the 90s, man, a vast majority of Britons never wanted Charles to be king, and people have been saying for as long as I can remember, he should just step aside and let William take the crown, because William will be young and have a nice long reign, and Charles will only have a short reign because he's already old and blah 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 blah. Bullshit. None of that matters. Monarchy doesn't care how old you are.
Right. Yeah. But see, this is the reason, to me, what shows the weakness of having a monarchy, because if someone can become monarch, and just by them being there, I mean, it's because it's for life, right? That they can be so detrimental to the system that you'd not want them to take their turn when they're due according to the system. That that just says, that's why, to me, at least with Trump. I mean, again, I'm assuming everyone's following the rules here, mind you. But, Trump is term limited. Even if he got elected again or whatever, then he'd only get one more term. So he'd do damage, but unless he got us wiped off the face of the earth, we wouldn't be done. We could recover from him eventually. But
if you have a bad king and he has too much power, then you're stuck for a long time.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Yeah, just imagine, like, if like prior to the change in the Constitution that limited the presidents to 2 terms, you could potentially have somebody who was just president forever. I mean, Roosevelt's the only one that had more than 2 terms, but it was up to that point, it was theoretically possible for any of them to have more than 2 terms.
Yeah, on the on the topic of bad monarchs, George, the one that you guys wrote a Dear John to. The guy was Looney Tunes. And the government did find a way to run the country with minimal interference from George. So if Charles does become king, you can guarantee that there will be checks and balances in place as to when he's consulted, when he's not consulted, and things will happen regardless of him.
I feel like if anybody can pull that off, it's the British. Like, literally, there's the king over there, and he's crazy, but the rest of the court has to keep the country running. We've done this before, guys. For like 1,000 years.
We have done it before. One of the downsides of royalty is the inbreeding, unfortunately, and inbreeding does produce a lot of instances of cuckoo kings and queens. So it is a well-trodden route.
I thought though that the inbreeding is a little bit of a myth. Not that it doesn't happen; it obviously happens. But the genetic stuff that comes along with all the inbreeding, I thought this was a little bit of a myth in that it does not happen as often as is thought as once
It's
or
a
about to happen or has been rumored to happen.
it's a hit and miss thing. I mean, if we look at the practice of pedigree breeding for specific traits in animals, yeah, dogs and cats and various other animals, inbreeding can go one of two ways. You can either get a superior specimen, or you can get an absolute waste
You
of
tend to
breath.
get both
Like like
effects.
like like Dalmatians. Like Dalmatians are all like insane because they're so overbred because you
Yeah.
can't mix them with anything else except another Dalmatian, and the breeding stock is fairly limited, and so
Yeah.
they're all like kind of
They're all loopy. They're all loopy. And the Dalmatian is an interesting dog. It was bred for one purpose and one purpose only, and that was to run behind a cart, a buggy.
For what purpose? Just to be like, look at my dogs?
Just look at the pretty, white with black spot creatures that I have trotting
Okay.
behind me.
People do some
Simple
weird
as
things.
that. And yeah, that was I forget which country it was, but it was done for a member of European royalty.
Yeah. I mean, but lots of stuff like that happens. Look at
Dalmatia, obviously.
look at the various bulldogs. They're called bulldogs because they were actually used to herd bulls, and they were a working dog, and they weren't brachycephalic, and they were kind of tough, because they were squat and they were tough. And then someone said, hey, when they have flatter faces, isn't that kind of cute? And let's keep breeding them for flatter and flatter faces. And now, like, the American Bulldog is so misshapen that they can't even copulate, that they actually have to artificially inseminate because they're too ungainly.
Well, their front legs are 2 feet long and their back legs are 6 inches long. I mean, it's not even funny.
And so they can't copulate. So they need artificial insemination, and they generally die of diseases related to not breathing well enough because they're so brachycephalic that they could die from a good cold, basically.
Not dissimilar to Persian cat. Like Persian cats are kind of the same thing, where they've inbred them with their faces to be so flat that they have and I think Scottish folds actually suffer from that a little bit too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is kind of sad. I don't want to think about I'd like to have a baby bulldog. Oop.
Paige
don't want to think about
Paige kind of consolidates down into a single concept what's going on. Inbreeding
what I'm saying though is that we know now that genetically speaking, there isn't really any problem with literally brothers and sisters breeding unless they happen to have specific genetic combos that will result in some kind of, as long as you can demonstrate that like you and your cousin or whatever having a baby is not going to have the potential of certain combinations that are basically, various genetic diseases, then there's no problem with that happening actually in the human race.
Yeah,
morally and ethically and how we perceive that different, but medically speaking,
which is why Paige's consolidation, just quickly, Joe, hits the nail on the head. It acts as an amplifier. As I said, you'll either get something that's great or you'll get something that's terrible because of the amplified effects in the genetics
and we actually have seen within the various royal families genetic diseases for exactly that reason. So I guess was it Tsar Nicholas's son, was a terrible hemophiliac, and that was again related to genetics.
Hemophilia is common in royalty, as are a few other conditions.
What's kind of amazing is, there was a show, I think the Patty Duke show in the 50s, I think it was, and the premise was identical cousins. Of course, it's funny, it's a joke, right? You can't have identical cousins. Take a look at Tsar Nicholas and King George. They're like virtually identical. And Wilhelm he's not identical, but he looks a lot like his two cousins. And it's like, holy shit, like there was 3 guys that are almost identical.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why when you look through the portraiture of the ancient kings and queens, it's sometimes very difficult to tell one from another.
Right.
And so I know like one of the things that can get amplified is like Down syndrome, something that can get amplified, and there's a bunch of other things like that. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I guess so. You're right, Cedric Danger, in that it doesn't always result in it, but the history of the various monarchs of Europe has shown that at least for that group of people, it did they did have problems.
And let's not forget
to be fair to Sister Danger's point, she's not talking. The royals of Europe weren't marrying their brothers and sisters hardly ever. They were marrying cousins and second cousins, and whatever.
Yeah,
and yet they still had these kind of things happen even with cousins.
Yeah, but there's the thing that you also have to remember as well with the most catastrophic disasters, those pregnancies generally don't materialize. You've also got a lot of infant death as well in royalty, and that's a result of some genetic problems.
The thing is with European royals, the reason why you did ended up with that amplification is that you basically had a very small breeding population, and this happened over 1,000 years roughly.
Yeah, I mean, it's only in the last 100, 200 years that royalty have actually got this through their head, and they've actually started saying, right, okay, as much as you love your cousin Beatrice, you have to actually marry a commoner. This
Go
is
ahead,
what
marry Meghan Markle. It'll be fine.
Yeah. This is precisely why Diana was Charles's chosen wife and not Camilla, because Camilla was too close. Yeah, in elsewhere in the family tree.
Right.
What?
That's really weird. Another comment from Paige McLaughlin in Aside was that the brother and sister pharaohs of Egypt. I don't know how many times that happened, but I'm certainly aware of a few times where Egyptian pharaohs were incestuous because it was seen. And if you believe in royalty at all, the logic is kind of makes logical sense that if you really want to have royal blood, you have to keep the blood royal.
Right.
So,
I mean,
well,
and to show you how early it started, this kind of stuff started is like when the Norman invasion happened in 1066, William came because he had a claim to the throne because he was a cousin of Harold.
Well, they all did that though. They all said that, in Europe.
There were three contenders at the time.
Over their neighbors because their cousin was the cousin of whoever, or this person just got richer than me, and now I want to go invade them because I'm supposed to be the richest king in Europe. I mean, it's just ridiculous the reasons they used to fight back in the day.
Yeah, well, Joe brings up a very, very interesting instance. 1066. There were three legitimate, air quotes, contenders for the British throne. Two of them were by relation, and the third, the Viking, was by contract because he had been promised. Yeah, it was a deal that had been struck.
Right, that was Harold Godwinson.
Yes.
Hello, Raven.
Hey, Raven.
Hello.
And I am related to William.
Oh, wow.
I mean, technically, by the definition of what constitutes a cousin, doesn't that literally just kind of make everybody some cousin removed of every other buddy ever?
Technically, yes.
Yeah. That's precisely why there is one human species. That's why we are a single species.
Right. That they might be your 89th cousin, but they are technically your cousin. If you look.
I was told in sixth grade that nobody's more than 9 cousins away from anybody.
And we're all African apes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a school of thought that puts forward the idea that each of us, all 5 of us in this room, share 6 ancestral common ancestors going back 2,000 year period.
Wow, that's a pretty intense thing. It almost makes
it's kind of cool when you think about it.
It is very cool. It makes me wish that Eric was here as well, because this is his sort of specialist area.
Yeah, he and I both.
Yeah.
Cool.
I was also just as an aside, because of Paige's comment made me thinking about the pharaohs and stuff. And I know I've done this before, y'all. So, say, Paul, for fuck's sake, let's talk about something real. But like, I was looking into, I was watching some documentaries about ancient Egypt, and I was marveling at the pyramids like I've done my whole life, right? And so I decided to break out my thing and look a few facts up and do the math. And in the largest of the three Great Pyramids, there's estimated to be 5 million stone blocks weighing between 2 tons and 10 tons, depending on where they are and what their purpose was and whatever. And Joe, I know you're an engineer, so you can appreciate. I mean, the thing about this is that blows me away. So 5 million blocks. It took 30 years to build the pyramid, right? So you just do the math. That's something like 270 blocks a day, every day, nonstop, every day for 30 years. That's a hell of a lot of quarry work, just cutting those rocks out of the mountain.
All you need is 30,000
transporting all those rocks and then putting them on, not just setting them down somewhere, but arranging them in the most beautiful building ever built, right? It's so obviously that it was so obvious to me that there was major industry in this civilization. Do you know what I mean? Absolutely. And we know things about the Egyptians, like the Egyptians had electric batteries, but we don't know what they did with the electricity. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, there's a couple of points on that I just want to raise, because like yourself, I have been fascinated with ancient Egypt for my entire life.
Me too.
One of the reasons for that is both my mother and grandmother, her mother, were born in Egypt.
Is your middle name Ahmed?
No. They were Air Force, so they were stationed there.
Right, Brian Akhenaten.
Yeah, Brian Akhenaten. So yes, point one was Cleopatra, yeah, and the people that we associate with Egypt, yeah, those pharaohs. Cleopatra in particular is closer to us historically than she was the builders of the newest pyramid. So there is more time elapsed between the finishing of the last pyramid and Cleopatra than there is between Cleopatra and us. Now, the thing is, in the centuries that they were building pyramids and the centuries since then, you have enough time to develop and perfect some incredible technology, and then because it's all done, it's built, yeah, and there's been, there was the Bronze Age collapse or whatever, yeah, and then you rebuild a civilization from scratch, you lose those skills.
Well, sure, that's where the Dark Ages were in Europe, wasn't it?
So yeah, so the same thing happened in Europe after the Romans left. So this is why you probably find that even Cleopatra didn't know what the fucking hell a battery was used for.
Right.
Yeah. Or even how the hell, this white glazed pyramid, man-made mountain that she woke up to every day, how the hell that was even built. So yeah, of course, those that came before, given the dirt that we had to build our civilization, rebuild our civilization out of, yeah, they had the skills of gods. Technology we can even only dream at, and we still are now, 2,000 years after Cleopatra, working out how it was done.
We don't know.
We do.
I said we are. I said we are working it out.
Okay. No, but yeah? we know. We knew in the early 1900s.
So Paul addressed me first in the first place, and I haven't had a chance to say anything yet.
Okay.
All right. So yes, we do actually, to Sister Danger's point that she's making, yes, we do have a very good idea now of how, at the very least, how those blocks were moved. and they found out that basically a mixture of water and oil poured from their amphoras would basically one, compact the sand, and two, make it slippery enough that they could move it very easily. And there was actually some drawing.
I have to. I'm sorry, Joe. I don't want to interrupt, but I have to take issue with the term "very easily." You know how many horsepower it takes to move 10 tons?
Yeah, but the whole thing is that they had lots of people and lots of horses. I mean, remember, this is a major construction project, and they devoted a lot of people to it.
It was the whole economy.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. That's when you think about the power that a pharaoh had. That goes to show you, like there was thousands of people devoted to just this, and we used
entire cities that literally cities of stonemasons.
We used to believe that this was done by slave labor. Now we know it was not. It was actually a badge of honor to be able to work on this.
Right.
So I feel like saying 10 tons makes it sound like it's a whole lot of weight. But I just want to maybe reframe that a little bit. Let's imagine 10 tons either on a water plane, such as Joe is describing, or on consecutive rolling logs, which is another way that they used to move things like this. Okay, 10 tons, right, is what, like 20,000 pounds? So a Ford F-350 weighs a little over 5 tons. So let's just put it in those terms. 2 Ford F-350s. Okay, now put those onto rolling. What? Yeah, of course they have wheels. But if your block is on, if your block is on logs, that's the same as having it on wheels. And now imagine a team of horses pulling that and people pushing that. Like
okay, but think of the numbers we're talking about. 240 every day, nonstop for 30 years. Think of the stonemasons it would take to cut all those out. You're like Brian said, you need a whole city just of stonemasons to cut the stone, and then you need a city of engineers to lay the stones.
So all you need to do is have 250 teams doing 1 block a day.
Well, that's the thing. And here's the thing, though. And I just looked it up. I wanted to see what the pulling. Actually, they probably didn't use horses. They probably used oxen, because oxen are way better and stuff.
Way better in sand, yeah.
A single oxen can pull somewhere between 12 and 13,000 pounds. So basically, a team of two oxen could pull that, could drag that. So you're only talking. So even if each team only pulled 1 block a day, you're talking basically, 500-600 oxen could easily do that.
Yeah, as I said, 250 teams doing 1 block a day. Job done.
Yeah.
Yeah, 150 teams, each team doing a block, or 250 teams, each team doing 1 block a day. That's just removing them. Then transporting them is a whole different issue. Then setting them up in the right order is another issue.
Yeah,
we're talking about infrastructure.
Yes, so you've got teams of cutters, you've got teams of movers, you've got teams of placers, you've got teams of finishers.
And you've also got, you have no workers' rights. So bread, water to death.
The other thing too, like, so in that case, so you're gonna have like those 250 teams at the quarry bringing the stuff to wherever it's being, and probably travels by water. So they bring it to boats, and then it's sailing, down the river, up the river, in any case. And then you have 250 more teams. I remember seeing an estimate that it would take. They're saying that it was, anywhere between 10 and 30,000 people would be devoted to the job. And that's a lot, but it's not that much.
Organizing that many people all by itself is a huge headache. I mean, it's hard enough to get 6 people to show up for the fucking dinner club. All right. So like, think about how hard it must be to get.
In my work. So like, I remember years ago, I was doing a job at Merck, and they were building a new building, and then there was process equipment going in, and I was doing the controls for the process equipment. And I remember sitting there in the parking lot one day, and I'm looking at the building as it's going up, and I'm thinking about everything that went into, because someone had to design the building, and somebody had to design, first the structure, the steel structure, and they had to design the concrete, and somebody had to design the piping, and somebody had to design the electrical conduit and all the boxes, and then somebody had to come in and put up, install it, and also then somebody had to build all those components, and put them together and then bring them there and assemble them. And it is amazing that anything gets done. But even there, if you look at, I mean, granted, they're not as big and they're not as grand, but if you look at medieval castles, what it took to build those, again, the blocks aren't as big, but you have more. You got thousands and thousands of blocks that went into these, particularly when you had like walled cities where you had like the castle, and then you had the first bailey, and then the outer bailey, and then you might even had beyond that.
Yeah. And generally, you'd have only 2 or 3, master masons directing everybody.
Yeah. So just a super quick Google search, right, of how many people. So scholars today, however, think the pyramids may have been built by about 20,000 men over approximately 20 years. So 20,000 people is not that much to manage when you have a kingdom of 1 million people, and you basically are just like, it's like how many 20,000 people companies are out there in existence. I mean, bazillions of them, right? Like,
and the other thing is
project management is all it is.
The other thing as well about the way that they did it, they lived their lives, and then for a certain, length of time, they willingly went to these cities, to these things, to do this. Yeah, because it was their joy to do this for their pharaoh.
There was prestige involved.
Exactly, and then they went back to their lives and did their crops and did their daily day job and everything else.
Well, just like any other job, right? I would bet you, just like now and every time before now that we have evidence of, there were probably people putting bids on the work, like, Abdul's masonry, we can cut those stones better than Ahmed.
A lot of the clay tablets that they found are these negotiations and tallying of the cost of this and who turned up for work. And the other thing that there's a lot of is what would effectively be gossip. It's letters, so and so bitching about such and such doing this at the site, and so doing that with so and so's wife. And
the oldest thing that we've translated so far, and I'm pretty sure it's either Sumerian or Babylonian, and it's basically a guy that, like, he paid in advance for, I forget if it was silver or bronze or bronze or copper, but he paid for some commodity, and he didn't get his whole shipment, and what he got was of low quality. And he wrote back to the guy like, "What are you doing to me? You're killing me here. You made promises and you didn't live up to them, and you're screwing my business." And I'm like, yeah, nothing's changed. And,
yeah, nothing changes. Nothing changes. People are people. We have been this way for 10, 20,000 years.
At least.
We just haven't had, the molded the planet to this degree yet.
Joe, you were just talking about, because I wasn't really paying attention, were you talking about like a document that was found, and once it was translated, it was found to be a guy bitching about getting screwed?
Yeah.
Because I heard about that, and I had the same exact thought. We have not changed. People will always be people.
Yeah.
I've seen that documentary's on YouTube.
Yeah, and he's like, "You were like my brother, and I trusted you, and I paid you in advance, and now you didn't deliver, and now I'm screwed because I can't fulfill my orders. And what have you done to me? You're gonna ruin my business."
Yeah, there's also exchanges like that between one of the pharaohs and one of his allies with regards chariots and various ambassadors and why the hell did you kill my blah blah blah. It's fascinating. People haven't changed a jot.
Go ahead, Raymond.
I was just gonna, because I wanted to change just slightly, but so maybe you should just go ahead, because I don't want to take it away from where you might be going.
Yeah, Brian mentioned chariots. Like, I know, like, it seems such a big project, but like, I remember seeing something like around the time like when the Hittites were doing their thing, that there was like 20.
I think it was one of the Hittites.
Yeah, 20,000 chariots, and that's not their entire force. That's just their cavalry force. 20,000 chariots, and each chariot had two people in it, and they had like usually two horses. So you usually had a drover, and then you had a warrior. So that means there's 40,000 guys just in the cavalry force alone.
Yeah, some of the armies that they used to be able to amass in ancient times were phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
So I was just going to say that. I mean, I don't remember who it was. I'm fascinated by ancient civilizations, and I don't remember who it was. If it was the Aztecs, the Mayans, or the Inca, but they didn't have the wheel. But they had very intricate road systems, and they had intricate ways of keeping track of inventory. Very counting systems, and
not to mention some highly imaginative and innovative water moving systems.
Yeah. But they didn't have the wheel of all fucking things. Is that they didn't have. And there was another thing. Was a document that was found, and once translated, it was basically a guy's inventory for his home about the food and stuff that they had in storage, and it was just like basic shit.
As you have that interest, Raven, maybe you've seen this documentary too, but I can remember seeing on YouTube, somebody was trying to work out, the way they moved water up the tiers, and they figured that they possibly even had the Archimedes screw before Archimedes.
Wow. I mean, that's the thing that's kind of amazing when you think about it. I mean, there's well, and actually, as far as the wheel goes, I mean, we think the wheel is so basic because we've had it for a long time, but you think about it, like it's not so easy because you have to have that rotor stator thing, and the whole idea that you have, so you can put two wheels on an axle, but then how do you attach it to the axle and still have it spin? It's not so obvious. It is obvious to us because we have it, but it took a while for people to actually figure that out.
Yeah, and until you do figure that out, or you're motivated to figure that out, and let's face it, if you're, clambering up and down a mountain all day, you probably have. It's probably easier to use Shank's pony than work out how to make a wheel work.
I would bet that there was probably a porn called Archimedes Screw.
Most likely. And now you've said it, is it Rule 34? It'll be out there somewhere.
If it doesn't exist yet, it will now exist.
Yeah.
As to the point about the Central Americans, I'm not sure which one. You didn't really know which one it was, Mayas, Incans, or Aztecs. I mean, it's pretty important. I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be the Mayans, because the Mayans were the ones who understood the precession of the equinoxes, because the Earth is on a 23-degree tilt, which itself also spins around, but it spins around once every 23,000 and some change years. So you have to be paying very precise attention to the stars to notice that. And we have a circle divided up into 360 degrees. They must have had a circle divided up into whatever number, but they must have had a circle divided up. So for them not to have a circle, for them to understand circles in motion and not have a wheel, just seems really weird.
Well, here's the thing: it was 360, and because you got to remember, the Babylonian mathematics system was based on 6, 10, and 60.
I'm talking about the Mayans.
Oh, the Mayans. Yeah, okay.
So
yeah, and it is the Mayans
and the Aztecs. I mean, they had a lot of pretty intricate technology and a lot of intricate games that included hoops. If they had a hoop, they most certainly somebody said, "Hey, look, we can roll it." So probably the Inca, but I don't remember exactly for sure. But my gut tells me it's the Inca. So
yeah, they definitely knew about circles, but when it comes to wheels, the phrase "is the juice worth the squeeze" comes to mind, given the terrain.
Well, yeah, that could be. We know what this is, but is it worth it to try to use it for something worthwhile?
Especially if you have a technology that works very well, which they obviously did.
Raven, your audio is much louder than everybody else's.
Well, that's good.
The background noise, not quite so much.
Yeah,
that's why I mute. That's the furnace. I'm like right next to it.
I was thinking it was AC. Doesn't your AC push out hot as well?
I think I'd like to change the subject a little bit, if that's all right with the group, to something a bit more contemporary and a little more serious and actually a little darker, unfortunately. Yesterday, there was a synagogue where people were taken hostage in Texas. I've been driving all day. The reason I postponed last night, because I was supposed to be driving yesterday, but then the weather, and I ended up driving today, which is why I'm in a motel. Anyway, but this, I take it now that all the hostages were released. Can somebody please, who's paid more attention to the news, elucidate me as to how the whole situation got resolved?
Well, basically the hostage taker was shot.
Was he?
Yeah, and they got all the hostages out safely. Here's the thing that makes no sense to me, though. So based on the writings that they have found of the hostage taker, they were definitely anti-Semitic, person, and they were like, blaming the Jews for everything under the sun, and they also hated the military. He and his sister, but the FBI is trying to say this was not related, in any way related to anti-Semitism. And I'm like, huh?
That makes no sense at all.
Yeah, because why would you go into a synagogue of all places to take hostages, particularly if you're anti-government, anti-military, but you're also anti-Semitic, and the only place you go attack is not a military base, it's not the police, it's Jews,
especially on the back of anti-Semitic writings. Exactly.
So I'm like, I think you guys are full of crap. I think there absolutely was anti-Semitism involved.
Well, that reminds me of when Elliot Rodgers did his shooting spree 5 or 6 years ago, and there was a whole bunch of YouTubers going, yeah, but he wasn't a misogynist. And if you read even one page of his manifesto, you've never seen worse misogyny in your life. How anyone could read that? I had to stop reading it. It was so bad.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about what we were talking about. It's just, I'm against all forms of bigotry, of course. And I think I might have basically been sleeping at the wheel as regards anti-Semitism, because I didn't really realize things were at the pitch they clearly are. I mean, we had that one a few years ago in Pennsylvania where like 9 or 10 or 11 people got killed. And then since this hostage thing, I looked it up last night. I mean, anti-Semitic attacks and harassment are on the rise in America by a really big factor. We seem to have lost Brian there. And I don't know why, or have I always been asleep at the wheel? Has it always been this big of a problem, or is it in fact bigger now than it used to be a few years ago?
Both. It's has always been a really bad problem, and it has gotten worse since Trump has been on the scene, because the same people who are part of that white supremacist mob that supports him, they also don't like Jews. See, what's weird is most of them support Israel, but they hate Jews.
They don't support Israel, Joe. Well, we've discussed this before in the Breakfast Club, but I mean, they don't really support Israel. They support this idea that they've been fed of what Israel is. They don't support Israel. No thinking person could support the kind of apartheid that goes on right now on the eastern shore.
Right. But they support the image they've been given of Israel in their head. But they also hate Jews because they killed Jesus, and among other things.
What they like is they like the idea that Israel exists, so eventually all of the Jews can go back to Israel,
right?
And that would be the second coming of Christ,
right?
Yeah, I mean, Bill Maher did a very bad taste, but accurate joke about that, where he's like, line up all the Jews, get my Jews in place, and that's what they want. They want the Jews all to be in Israel and they want the Temple Mount to be rebuilt, so that then And see, the Israeli government knows this about about the evangelical mythology, and they use it for their advantage, and it just really bothers me, just as an aside, do you think they would ever demolish the mosque to rebuild the Temple Mount? I mean, that would be so brazen. I can't imagine it ever happening.
I hope not.
Right. I hope not too.
Well, the thing is, it gets me is that, so they got that one wall. If they built in the other direction, so they could still have the remaining, that one part of the wall that survives be part of it, but that's not good enough. It has to be in this exact spot and blah blah blah. And actually, what's really sad is that the last time they came close to it,
Figure it out.
they had actually worked all those details out. It all came down to what we called it on, what was going to be called on the map. And I'm like, why can't it have both names, right? I mean, but again, people find great reasons to destroy progress.
Yeah, I mean, it's way too complicated to get in on a podcast, but I mean, the situation in terms of how to sort that out is, it's a mess. It's been a mess for 100 years. Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, sorry about that. My internet crapped out for a bit. I lost track of what we're talking about as well.
We were just talking about there was hostage taking yesterday in Texas where
yes,
the guy apparently got shot, which I'm not relieved he got shot, but I was relieved to see that the hostages got released. I mean, did any hostages actually suffer any injuries or anything?
Nothing permanent.
Okay,
good.
That's good.
Good.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. A lot of people, a lot of the anti-woke brigade, they like to complain about people who complain about racism. But I don't necessarily see the anti-woke brigade talking too much about people complaining about anti-Semitism. And I'm wondering, I mean, the point you made a minute ago, Joe, I mean, when I was living in the UK a couple of years ago, and I was having a chat to a customer of mine and his wife, and they were Muslim, and we were just having a friendly chat, and it sort of strayed into politics. And I said, isn't it interesting how the same people who are anti-Semitic are also Islamophobic?
Mm.
I find it very interesting that the Venn diagram is going to be pretty close to an overlap there.
Right.
So it's really not about religion when it comes to anti-Semitism or Islamophobia. It's something else. It's otherism. It's just otherism.
Yeah, it is otherism.
Yeah, because and it actually gets more. Well, I guess, and technically speaking, and usually when we say anti-Semitic, we really mean people of Jewish extraction, be they religious Jews or
Sure.
Jews or whatever. But of course, we know the Arabs are Semitic also.
Well, Palestinians are Semitic people. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the point I was going to make. The whole thing about Arabs being anti-Semitic. Sorry, they are Semitic.
Yeah.
And this is and this is one of the things that pisses me off about accusations of anti-Semitism and stuff like that. You're probably aware of this, Paul, and you know where I'm going. The witch hunt currently in force within the Labour Party concerning anti-Semites, being harbored and encouraged by the Labour Party. I call it a witch hunt because that's exactly what it is. It's been manufactured as a way of keeping Labour out of power.
Right.
And the thing is with Labour is that they've swallowed this hook, line and sinker, and they are pursuing this witch hunt. And it's ridiculous. And it's based on the most insane semantics that you can imagine.
I'm anti-semantic.
Simply put, criticism of Israeli politics equals criticism of Israel equals anti-Semitism.
Right. I get that all the time.
Yeah.
And it's complete bullshit.
Well, it's particularly galling to me, being 1/8 Ashkenazi, growing up in my grandmother's house was 50% Ashkenazi. I was like, yeah, no, no. It's like, in fact, I got to the point where I'm like, my criticism, it got so specific. My main problem is with the Likud party. I realized that the real problem is the Likud party. That when the Israeli Labor Party was in charge, things went fairly well, and they were able to come to accommodation. And then the Likud part. So back in the 90s, now you had the Oslo Accords and everything. Then Netanyahu and the Likud party get in control, and they literally are like, "Oh well, that treaty that was negotiated by a prior administration. That doesn't count. Isn't binding on us." Which of course,
you skipped a whole bunch of important stuff. I mean, obviously there was Ariel Sharon before that and Barak Ehud before that. But I mean, like the real tragedy from my point of view as an observer of Israel is when Yitzhak Rabin got shot.
Right.
Because Yitzhak Rabin was in Likud. Wasn't he? I'm pretty sure he was a Likud politician. And he was famous for being a general and everything. And he was, I personally cried when Yitzhak Rabin shook hands with Yasser Arafat, and it has nothing to do with me, but I just thought I'd never see the day, And when the right-wing extremist Israeli citizen shot Yitzhak Rabin, all the previous efforts from the beginning of the 90s to that moment in 1995 basically got flushed down the toilet. And Ehud Barak came in and he decided that he made Palestinians disingenuous offers, which they couldn't possibly accept, and then say, see, they don't want to negotiate. And then ever since then, Ariel Sharon got in, and it's just been, there hasn't been any honest attempt to solve the problem with a two-state solution or even with a one-state solution. There's no solution except for extermination and apartheid, and that's not a solution.
Paul, I looked. He was part of Labor, as was Shimon.
He was part of Labor. Okay, I wasn't sure,
and that's why Shimon Peres took over immediately after he
died. Right. I remember that. Yeah.
And then Ehud Barak. But then when Netanyahu, so we're talking like, I was in Allentown, so it would have been somewhere between 96 and 99 when Likud got in control, basically tossed out the Oslo Accords, messed everything up. Then Labor gets back in for a while, and then Likud, they bring back Netanyahu again, and it's like, and then of course the things went to shit again, and that's why, they've bombed, they bombed hospitals. They bombed journalists.
They do things that any other country would be a pariah for, and somehow they're not made into a pariah. Hell, in the 1960s, the Israelis sank a U.S. ship in the Mediterranean, the USS Liberty, you can look it up, and said, oops, sorry, our bad. Even though we were warning them, hey, we're a friend. Hey, don't shoot. They sank it.
Yeah.
They paid reparations, but they sank. Name me another country anywhere, friend or foe, that can sink one of our ships and get away with it.
Well, came close. Iraq, before we got mad at them, they did hit the USS Stark. It didn't sink, but 37 sailors died.
Fair enough.
We might get away with it if it was accidental enough. I don't know.
Well,
it would have to be demonstrably accidental. Like there was friendly fire instances in both the Afghanistan and Iraq wars between British and Americans.
Yeah,
we dropped bomb on a British tank, as I recall, in Iraq, because I remember the British officer specifically saying, "No, the tanks are marked, so they can't possibly be misidentified." And then I think it was Jon Snow said, "Well, clearly it was misidentified because the Americans bombed it."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, friendly fire is a thing, and we have suffered a lot of friendly fire incidents at your hands. But we don't go to war with you over it.
I have one other example, Paul.
Go on.
When we accidentally bombed the French embassy in Libya in 83. Or 86.
86.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, like accidentally, and I was like, I knew some people who like his father he was at Mendenhall at the time. And he's like, yeah, accidentally, and it's like, well, because I mean, they just happened to hit an empty, unused part of the building at a time they knew it would be unoccupied,
There is, if I may sort of tiptoe into conspiracy theory speculation, there is talk that, or a hypothesis going around, that a lot of what's going on in Israel is weapons testing for the US military, albeit very black ops.
That's pretty disgusting to contemplate.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it wouldn't be. I mean, it's not very well hidden because I mean, basically, you know, and they do get a lot of weapons from us. Although the Israeli, I mean, this is the other thing too, is that the Israeli arms industry is pretty developed at this point. So way back when we were giving money to Israel, like a lot of it came back to us because we were selling them aircraft and tanks and stuff like that. Most of their stuff's homegrown now. So,
well, how many American contractors are on these projects?
Not as many as it used to be.
And how many Americans are currently in Israel doing their once a lifetime service in the Israeli army and related activities?
Yeah, but see, those are mostly Jewish Americans who aren't, you know, necessarily part of the apparatus here. So
yeah, as I said, I'm tiptoeing into conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the thing is, the Israeli.
I'm glad Paul's laughing.
Yeah,
I'm laughing at Sister Danger. I'm sorry, I'm not paying.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
The Israeli arms industry is very well developed at this point, and actually doesn't need us. And that's one of the things that I've heard when they let things out when they're trying not to. But everyone's cautious because, like you said, everyone's afraid of being called an anti-Semite. But when people let things out in little ways, you know, they are starting to question, like, well, you know, we're giving them all this money and they're not spending it here.
You just reminded me of something, and this we can take this and broaden it out and then slightly change the subject, or we can stay on the same subject. But I made a post once. Every once in a while, like every month or two, I just remind my Twitter followers, which is a couple of dozen people, hey, don't forget that no matter how bad things are where you are, even though it's not in the news, Palestinians suffer ethnic cleansing, human rights abuses every single day. And I said this once, and someone hit me with the whole anti-Semitic charge. And I'm like, I'm criticizing the state of Israel. I didn't mention Jews or being Jewish or anything. The only mention I said to Israel is that they're oppressing Palestinians. As far as I'm concerned, that's not even an opinion. It's just an observation, you know? Anyway, but my point is I was called an anti-Semite for this. And as Brian pointed out earlier, oftentimes you get called an anti-Semite if you criticize the state of Israel. And this person said to me something that I didn't have a good comeback for. And Raven and Joe in particular, you might have a good comeback for me on this one.
Sure.
They say, I'm Jewish. Don't presume to be able to tell me what is or isn't anti-Semitism. Now, I've had the same comment. I've heard the same comment from LGBT people saying, don't tell me what's homophobia or don't tell me what's transphobia. And I've heard the same thing. And I agree with those sentiments. How am I supposed to know, Joe, what sounds racist to you as a Black person, unless I think about it first? Do you know what I mean? Whereas you are already tuned into it because you've had a lifetime of it. So you see what I'm saying? So I personally don't think that it's reasonable to claim someone's anti-Semitism strictly and only on the basis they've criticized political decisions by the state of Israel.
Right. I mean, the response, I think, should have been, I didn't say anything about Jews or Jewish people.
That's what I said.
I mentioned the actions of a state organization.
Yeah, that's what I said. And I was told not to presume to tell them what isn't anti-Semitism because they are Jewish and they know how to spot it.
I would turn it around and then I would say, okay, well, I'll accept what you're saying because I don't want to be anti-Semitic, but tell me what's the appropriate way to criticize the action of the sovereign state of Israel while avoiding anything that is or could be perceived as anti-Semitic, and see if they have any answer. Because if they don't answer or they give you some mealy mouth answer, then you know that person is not honest. Like okay, Brian and I
personally, Joe, I think telling me it's anti-Semitic isn't honest in the beginning because it's clearly not.
I know, but you're basically putting them on the spot. You're flipping the switch. It's like remember. Okay, Brian and I got into an argument a few months ago.
Never.
And yeah, I know, right? That never happened. But and the point that at the time was that Brian didn't see something as possibly racist. Well, I did, And he was, and I finally put it to myself, well, how would you know? And
oh yes, I
yeah.
remember. Yes.
And then after thinking about it, and I know I got kind of irate about it, and then I know Brian, I I probably stepped over some lines too, but so then Brian left, but then later on he thought about it and he came back and said, okay, I see where you're coming from, because you're going to see things in a way that I necessarily can't, because I don't have the same context. And so, but the thing is that at least there I was able to articulate why it was problematic. This person didn't do that. So by turning it around, by basically what you're doing is you're not being defensive. You're saying, okay, I'll accept what you're saying to me, but you need to tell me then how is it possible to, in a way that not anti-Semitic, how do I criticize the action of a sovereign state that has nothing to do with the religion of the people who live there? And then, and basically, if they're an honest interlocutor, they'll have an answer for you. If they're not, and they probably are not, now you've trapped them. Then you can quite frankly, ignore them.
Yeah.
Because and to that, in that same way, I have seen Black people who have done the same thing, but could not articulate why some bullshit was racist, because it probably really wasn't in that case. So by stepping back and kind of at least initially accepting what they say, you've disarmed them. So you're not fighting them. You're rolling with the punch.
Yeah.
And now you put it in their court, and now the burden is on them.
Yeah. Yeah. Just further to your point, Joe, and you're right. On reflection, it was a very bad example to use for the point that I was trying to make. But ironically, the actual point that I was trying to make, that little outburst, and it was not just you, it was you and Raven that essentially shut me down and told me shut my mouth, shut my white whore mouth, basically. That actually, ironically, demonstrated the real point that I was trying to make at the time, which was the American narrative is being stamped onto everybody's perception thanks to the internet on most topics, and particularly racism.
Well, I mean, American media is pretty good at misinforming people. I mean, I was and not necessarily intentionally doing it, but like I used this example once before. Before I moved to the UK, I thought the conflict in Northern Ireland was a religious one between Irish and Irish Catholics and British Protestants. It wasn't a religious war at all. And then another one is like where as regards Israel. Before I moved to the UK, just all I really knew, most of what I knew, I should say, not all, but most of what I knew, I gleaned off of the news over the course of my lifetime through the 70s and 80s. And in the late 80s, there was a whole bunch of talk because Yasser Arafat was doing his thing, trying to, get some land for the Palestinians that was actually theirs. And the way it was portrayed in American media was that the West Bank and Gaza were really Israel. It's just that these pesky Palestinians won't get the hell out of the way.
Right.
It was never portrayed all the way through, as far back as I can remember, as an illegal occupation, which is what it is.
Right. I want to further Brian's point, and on something on a very light topic, but like, so, and it's a word that I don't like to use, and in the American connotation is considered very bad, but in the British connotation it's completely different. And I think Brian already knows what the word is. The word cunt. Brits say it all the time, and so do Aussies, and it doesn't carry the same. Like here, it's definitely got a misogynistic connotation. It doesn't have the same meaning in the UK. It doesn't have the same meaning in Australia. So what's really funny, actually, I saw a video from Christy Winter a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, that she actually talked about the word, and she's like, I actually kind of like the word, but depending on the context, like if you mean it the way the Brits mean it, and then she's like cunt, but if you're going to use it the way with the connotation that it has here in America, I don't like the word. And I'm like, yeah, well, of course, context matters.
First, I wanted to say it to Vegas. Oh, dude, no, fuck that, Joe Rogan. No, that's just wrong. And the other thing I wanted to say was I wanted to correct Paul. It's not like misinforming. It's misuninforming.
Just to further what Joe was saying about the word cunt, in British and Australian cultures, its usage is very similar to the Hawaiian aloha. Its meaning is absolutely and utterly dependent on context.
Absolutely.
It can be
Goodbye.
yeah, it's hello, goodbye, it's I love you, it's you
Australians use the word as
absolute utter
punctuation.
shit. They do. Yeah, they do. They do. That's how we use fuck as punctuation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the word fuck. It's the most versatile word in the English language.
Next to cunt.
I'll see your cunt and I'll raise you a fuck.
Well, only with consent.
Only with consent.
That
with
sounds
consent.
like a proposition.
So I'll see your cut. Well, only if I let you. No.
Yeah. I was about to say, yeah, well done. I've never seen my cunt.
It was like the old joke about. I think it came. Well, it probably predated, but it was in the movie Porky's. You call up. You're looking for Mike. My guy, friend Michael. His last name is Hunt. Mike Hunt. Anyone have seen Mike Hunt? Yeah, but you say it fast.
Yeah,
pretty
that's a
funny
classic.
scene.
That's a classic.
I'll tell you what, though, there's a movie that must be banned in modern times now. I mean, talk about misogynistic. I mean, Porky's is straight up rite of passage, lose your virginity, boy fantasy, like misogyny.
Yep.
On the flip side, an old film that I think should have some spotlight coverage and actually be brought to the fore and pushed into people's consciousness. I forget what it's called, but it's the one that features the song "Baby It's Cold Outside," because people really need to get the context of that.
Yeah. That whole thing of it's been interpreted in modern times as like really creepy, but the idea is pointing out that she's really not worried. She doesn't really want to leave, but she's more worried about what people will say about her.
Exactly. She wants to say yes, but she wants to keep up appearances. But the other thing with that film is that song appears twice. Yeah. In the scene that everybody knows, it's him trying to persuade her to stay. The second appearance of it in the film, the table is absolutely turned. And when it comes to social commentary, what that film is telling people in the context of that is it happened on both sides.
Now, that's the film Baby's called?
I can't remember what the film's called. It's the one that features that song. It's a Christmas movie. That's the only other thing I can remember about it.
Well, and that's the thing, and you're talking about a time when, because of puritanical attitudes, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, who were actually married, couldn't be shown in bed together because, and I got the I get the idea that they didn't want people who weren't married to be in bed on TV, but they're actually fucking married. I mean, no reason
but there was another aspect to it as well. I mean, it was part of how courtship worked back then. It was part of the will she, won't she? It was part of the chase, and it was part of the banter, and it was, part of the social etiquette at the time. Yes, Raven.
Neptune's daughter.
Well, you think
Yes.
about that though, it's like it's basically it was the attitude, like, you know, trying to convince us like, well, it's not like married people sleep together and have sex. I mean, you know, that's how messed up we were as a culture, is that, you know, even implication of sex. And that's why, like, you know, it was a long time before they could even say pregnant. They had to say in the family way, which is like so fucking lame.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the modern criticisms and the narrative concerning that film is that it's about date rape and it's about using alcohol to subdue your victim and all of that. And it's utter bollocks. It really is.
So in the family way, that means that everybody's fighting and not talking to each other. Won't sit.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, everybody's staring daggers at each other over the turkey.
So what song can you think of? And I'm going to start with Sister Danger and go clockwise around. What song can you think of that is like either got the worst possible taste or just like literally makes you cringe? Can you think of any that are so like that once you thought it was funny and now it makes you cringe?
Cringe is harder for me to come up with than I guess shock a little bit. But the song by Mungo Jerry, in the summertime when the weather is hot, you could jump right up and touch the sky, right? If her daddy's rich, take her out for a meal.
Right,
if
right.
her daddy is poor, just do what you feel.
Right,
You
right.
speed along the lane, do a ton or a ton of
I never really
25,
gave
you know,
it that
like,
much thought until you said it.
yeah, well, and then there's like the other line too, where, you know, have a drink, have a drive, go out and see what you can find. Like the whole song is just riddled with, oh my God, nobody would ever. None of that is okay anymore.
Yeah,
None of
but
it.
wasn't it originally written as a commentary on exactly that? Yeah, in a satire form. Wasn't that the intent? Was to sort of highlight this is not how to behave, but
Right.
it's.
Well, I don't know, because I think it's from
But people do it.
the 70s,
Yeah.
and but some of the other lyrics to me would imply that no, they're literally just talking about like having a good time, you know, because they're just like
Well, having lived through the 70s, it was a different age, and yes, morals were looser.
I mean, but when I listened to that, like I really listened to all the lyrics for the first time, I was like, and I didn't know it, do a ton of 25, man. I had to actually look that up. I love it when I have to do that with songs. But yeah, I didn't know what that meant. And then I was like, oh my God. And then it's like, have a drink, have a drive. Like, wait, what?
Pedal,
no, like none
pedal
of this
to pedal to the metal, baby.
Yeah. So that one I remember just being pretty shocked when I actually listened to all the lyrics. I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to sing this out loud where other people can hear me.
Just changing the subject briefly. Sister Danger. Before we moved, you and I had like a sort of background lighting battle. Yeah, just a brief instant. It was great. It was fun. What do you think of my new setup?
Well, can you embiggen him so that I can properly, fully give the weight of my I'm judging?
No. I'm not talking about the bee. I'm not talking about the bee. That's just co-host on another project. No, I'm talking about my lighting.
I like that thing. I have many things that do that in my household, so I like it. let me just
turn off.
You can do it from the computer? What?
No, I can turn off the. I can turn off. No, I can't.
There you go. You got the remote control light. There you go. Joe, what about you? What's the wrongest song you can think of?
Okay, well, I'll say runner-up, because since it was mentioned, Paige mentioned Brown Sugar by the Rolling Stones, which is effectively about raping the black slaves. You know,
right.
But I think even worse than that, and it's hard to be worse than that, there's a song by a band called The Mentors, and it's called the 4F Club. And the chorus is, find her, feel her, fuck her, forget her.
Okay.
Pretty
Yeah.
remote.
Can I add a runner-up song to that?
Yeah, go on.
I think it's the Bloodhound Gang. The lap dance is so much better when the stripper is crying. Yes, the lap dance is so much better when the
I've never
stripper
heard
is
that one.
crying.
I don't know
Well,
some
I
of these.
find it's quite a thrill when she grinds me against her will. Yes, the lap dance is so.
Wow.
Oh, and that's just the chorus.
That's
Never really thought about it. Yeah.
wow.
You-
Just to follow up
that
quickly
was
on
pretty vulgar.
was it Golden Brown that you mentioned, Joe?
Brown Sugar.
Oh,
Brown
Brown
Sugar.
Sugar. Sorry, I was thinking something
Right.
completely different. I was thinking Golden Brown. That was about heroin.
Hey,
Right.
Woke? Raven?
Woke, that's right.
Woke.
Actually, I don't find anything really all that cringy. Like, even if the subject matter is really, really cringy, still don't get like freaked out about like music. But I do know there's one song that's pretty cringy that was always a very popular song. The Rolling Stones, Under My Thumb.
Right.
No, not familiar with the lyrics. I mean, it's like under my thumb, the squirming dog who just had her day. Under my thumb, a girl who just changed her ways. Yeah, it's very misogynistic.
Pretty bad.
There's so many though. I mean, like another one. You guys familiar with the Alice in Chains song "Love Hate Love"?
Don't know it.
Oh, okay. So it's off their first album, and let me see here. I tried to love you. I thought I could. I tried to own you. I thought I would. I want to peel the skin from your face before the real you lays to waste. And then a little further down, lost inside my sick head. I live for you, but I'm not alive. Take my hands before I kill. I still love you, but I still burn. And the thing is, what bothers me the most about that song, it's. I mean, the lyrics are pretty reprehensible, but musically, I love the song. So it's like, so it's one of those ones that I'll sing along with it, but it's painful because it's like, oh, these are really, really horrible lyrics.
Right. What about you, Brian?
I was tempted to go with "You Wanna Be in My Gang" by Gary Glitter, but I've decided I've actually decided to go with Aqualung.
Okay.
Because
Candyman. No, wait, that's Aqualung is Jethro Tull. Sorry.
Yes.
I was thinking of Aqua.
Jethro Tull, Aqualung.
Yeah.
Never mind.
And purely because such a reprehensible individual is this person that is the subject of that song.
Yeah, I don't know much about Ian, who's the guy from Jethro Tull. Mine, I kind of like things that are wrongish. I kind of find them funny. So I like Raven, I guess. It doesn't really offend me so much, but I recognize the wrongness when I hear it. And it's the song I'm about to mention was deliberately written wrong. It's supposed to be wrong. And that's Date Rape by Sublime. If it wasn't for date rape, I'd never get laid. I mean, come on.
Don't know the song.
See, I feel like that's
it's hilarious, but it's also wrong.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like that's how the Bloodhound Gang song is. Like, it's hilarious, very wrong, but hilarious. But I think it's because a lot of their music is written to be purposefully quite wrong.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing when someone's trying to shock you, it's obviously different because they're not really promoting it. They're like Guar. Read any of the Guar songs. There's a lot of stuff. But
how do you hide money from a hippie?
Put it under the stove.
Yeah, here we go. Classic example. Monty Python. Isn't it great to have a penis?
Yeah.
Actually,
I want to read you guys some lyrics though, because I think this is really funny. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but this is a song that you all have heard before, but because it's being sung by a very famous band, you might not really see what what they're driving at. So I'm just going to read it here. Last night I said these words to my girl. I know you never even try, girl. Come on. Please me. Oh yeah, like I please you. You don't need me to show you the way, love. Why do I always have to say love? Come on, 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 come on. I don't want to sound complaining, but you know there's always rain in my heart. I do all the pleasing with you. It's so hard to reason with you. Oh yeah, why do you make me blue? Last night I said
oh, sorry.
Yeah, right. But I mean, like, clearly he's doing all the oral sex and she's not. I mean, that's what that song's about, right?
It's a great song.
Lily Allen has done what would basically be the converse to that. Yeah, she's.
I don't recognize.
Yeah, I know
great.
that song. It's called not Big.
What's the song that Paul you just? I don't recognize
that song. But Paul was reading the lyrics to is from one of the most celebrated bands in history.
Well, what's the fucking name of this song?
It's the Beatles. It's the Beatles.
Please.
Yeah. That's the Beatles.
By the Beatles.
Okay. So now, and to your point, Paul, about liking things that are like a little, over the line. Yeah, I definitely like a certain amount of dark humor. Like my all-time favorite sketch on SNL. It's called "Greatest Invention in the World," or no, the most evil invention in the world. And basically, what it is, and they're basically making fun of the mad scientist trope from like comics and movies and stuff like that, where the evil person always wants to do something that's fairly trivial and stupid and ridiculous. So they have this contest, and so the first person he's got a freeze. She's got a freeze ray, and she's all encase all the world's monuments in solid ice. And this guy is Dr. Micronox, and he's got a shrink ray, and he'll shrink all the monuments to the size of a toy, And then the next it's Dwayne Johnson, and he's like, "Hi, my name is Roy, and for my invention it's a child molesting robot." And like the host is like, what did you say? He's like, oh, I'll speak up, and it's like it's twice as more efficient as a regular molester, and it can molest twice as many children in roughly half the time. It runs on solar cells and rechargeable batteries, so it costs pennies to manufacture. And the one guy, the shrink guy's like, "You made a mechanical sex predator." It's like, yeah, this guy gets it. He's like, Jesus Christ, no, I don't. And then he's like, when everyone's getting upset, he's like, he's like, I want you to understand that, evil, Webster's dictionary defines evil as profoundly immoral. And then the ice lady, she's like, "We know what evil means." He goes, "It doesn't seem like you do because you melt a freezer." And then the shrink guy's like, "This is the worst thing I've ever heard." And he's like, "Oh, well, this guy, the shrink guy's with me all the way." He's like, "Stop saying that." But of course, look, child molestation is one of the worst things we could possibly think of. But the thing is, so some people in the comments are like, "This is horrible. How can people laugh at this?" But the joke's not about child molestation. It's making fun of the trope of the mad scientist that does this stupid, ridiculous bullshit that if you were actually a smart, evil person, you'd think of much better things to do.
Yeah,
child molestation is so evil that it's too evil for evil people.
Right? Yeah. Like, oh my God, this is terrible.
And it plays on the back of we know we can do it, but should we do it? Which is the scientist's dilemma.
Well, I mean, that's Frankenstein, isn't it? I mean, that's the original science fiction plot.
I mean, if their purpose was to answer, should we do it in the book Frankenstein, I think that they did a very poor job of answering that question. Question of should is not answered in the book of Frankenstein.
I think it is.
I think it is too. I also think that too much attention is spent on the monster as being the monster.
I guess that, I mean, how is it answered though? Because everything that happens when he does this is pure speculation. So it's like, yes, that's right. We've now morally proven our point because we created a speculative answer to this question, right?
Yes, but the answer is far more obvious than that. Yeah, it's the response from the general population The response from the general population is, in essence, kill it with fire.
Yeah, I mean the other thing too.
Not a reason. That's,
yeah, but here's the thing, though. You got to remember.
No, the response to witches was kill them with fire, and we should. What? No, we shouldn't.
And that, yeah, but here's the thing. How was that? How does burning the witches or not burning the witches? How does that not end in a should we, shouldn't we scenario?
Well, also too, you got to remember this was during the Romance period, where there's a lot of questioning of, again, the ethics of science. Like, what's science going to, science can do a lot of nice things for us, but it can also destroy us or bring us down a bad road. And that's, to me, fairly obvious in the writing, because you have to look at the context of what was being written at the time. There was a lot of other stuff like that. But The Strange Island of Dr. Moreau was written around the same time.
Hey, yeah. Frankenstein, written by Mary Shelley, when she wrote it, basically made her the mother of science fiction.
That's right.
She birthed the entire genre with that story, and there's so many ways to look at it, and it's been diced and dissected by literary scholars since it's been written. And there are no good guys. There are no good guys in Frankenstein. And who is worse, the monster who created the monster, or the monsters who wanted to torch the monster?
Exactly.
That is like the most fundamental question I think we can ask ourselves about society.
Exactly.
Invention and
classic story.
Yeah. Also, remember too, sometimes with an author, like I said, I think, like with Brian, I kind of agree with Brian that kind of does answer the question. But I think, remember, also a lot of writing is to provoke the question, is to say, okay, well, you figure it out,
I guess that I just don't see the question of should something be done. I don't think that the popular argument, like, oh, well, everybody disliked it, therefore we shouldn't do it. That is not a logically sound answer. And I don't.
There is a very modern parallel.
I don't agree that that just because the monster turned out bad means that the whole thing should have been not done ever at all, nor should it ever be done ever again. Because if that was the case, anytime any kind of scientific experiment failed in any way that resulted, possibly terribly, also, I don't think that we can look at it from any kind of a spiritual standpoint, because, well, we have no evidence of anything of the sort actually even existing to be impactful in that way. And so this guy, he digs up dead corpses and assembles them into a body, and then electroshocks them to, jumpstart the heart. So
I have a question. Who do you think the monster was?
Well, the monster is Adam, which is created by Dr. Frankenstein.
I disagree, but okay.
You disagree?
Okay.
That's well, I understand.
At the time,
hold on.
At the time,
I know that there's this whole notion that the real monster is the doctor because he did the terrible, evil doctor thing and created the thing. But in the simple premise of the story, Dr. Frankenstein creates the thing Adam, and it is just in the most simple version of the story, that is thought of as the monster. If you want to get literally deep, then yes, you're like, that's just nothing but an animated corpse.
Monsters. I would argue about that. I would argue monsters look at the monster and call it a monster. Not the guy who.
But in order to call him a monster, you have to say that he's done something terrible. If you think that digging up corpses, and so. And he has.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, I think you're looking for the answer to the wrong question, because again, the whole point is about ethics. I don't think it is saying that should never be done. I think, but the whole point is that when you're doing science, if you do science without an ethical eye to what you're doing, the potential to do bad exists. So it's not saying let's not ever try anything or don't do anything. It's like, don't do it. Science without ethics leads to bad things.
Yeah, I don't think the whole point of it is to have a yes or no answer. Because you're not going to find a yes or no answer in Frankenstein. It's more about like what Joe was saying, and understanding what science can do and where you are in your society and what your society can handle, what it can bear. If your society isn't going to be able to deal with the reawakening of a corpse, then don't do it. Then don't do it, because then you are the monster, not the corpse.
I think the monster was the people who basically tried to destroy something just because they didn't understand it. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm with
I agree.
Yeah, yes. There's a triage of monsters going on there, and it's very deep, very philosophical, and we could talk about the philosophy of that book for hours. But what I wanted to say, scientifically, at the time that was written, you had people in the efforts to understand how the human body works and advanced medicine, they were digging up corpses. You've got the what's his name, Burke and Hare, infamous. Okay, so you had experimentation that was going on with corpses. Yeah, there was a very lucrative market in corpses.
Well, that's because it was illegal. I mean, it still is technically illegal to go digging people up and then selling them. But
I've been trying to make this point for a while. So you had that experimentation going on in science. Okay, you had a fascination with reanimating flesh. You had experiments with making frogs move and shit like that. And science starts with an idea, a dream. Can this be done? Yeah. And they were doing all that they could in the name of progressing medicine to figure out how human bodies work. And fast forward a bit, and you had Josef Mengele doing abominable experiments on living people. And you have all sorts of efforts to create life in the laboratory, the building blocks of it, again, in the name of advancing medicine. And we had a great conversation the other week on some of the ethical questions that get raised as a result of the science that is being done. Artificial intelligence was the big topic that we had. And in Mary Shelley's time, it was the stuff they were doing on the corpses, and her book was the what if speculations. Right. And yes, the people that destroyed what they couldn't understand. Just look at the anti-vaxxers today.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, the part of the reason why it was illegal because there was no system of donating your body to science. So it was virtually impossible for anyone to actually study anatomy in that way. I remember reading a thing about like when Ben Franklin was in the UK, that there's some evidence that he was involved with studying bodies and having them dug up and paying people to get bodies and dissecting human bodies, because again, it was the only way that this research could get done. And so in a way, like I say, I think if you look at each person said a different person was the monster, but yeah, I think they're all the monster from a different point of view. And that's again part of it. It's a very complicated question because yes. So we look at what those guys were doing, digging up bodies, and they were kind of, their hand was forced, but yet we got a lot of modern advances. On the flip side, the research from Mengele, we basically made a decision that we were not going to use it. That stuff, I mean, it was never thrown away, but it was basically buried because it was like the line was crossed. That was way too far in the even though it would have. Now, personally, if I was tortured in that way, I would actually want the proceeds to further, because at least my death meant something. But we decided that, I guess, in a way, just to not promote this from to kind of discourage from happening again, that we're not going to use that data. even though it would be useful for us because
this
it was
has all been covered in an episode of Star Trek Voyager. Go ahead, Raven.
It has. So like the whole question of like, can we do, and if we should. I think Frankenstein was a great example. And like I said before, I think looking for a yes or no is kind of missing the point. The story of Frankenstein paints a really beautiful portrait of the entire issue, and then leaves it up to you to figure out. So yeah, you're not going to find a yes or no, but it did answer the question beautifully from any angle you look at it. So
Me? What? Me, Joe? You're on mute.
I thought you were waiting to talk.
Me?
Yeah.
No, I'm just listening.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I have something I wanted to add then. The thing is with should we do it or whatever. Unfortunately, you can't know that until after you've tried.
I disagree with that.
That's not always true.
It's not always true.
So this
I grant you that. But when Einstein realized that E equals mc squared, he could not have imagined at that time that would lead to the splitting of the atom. It's an inevitable progression from that to that. But he had a revelation, published it, didn't necessarily think through. And even if he had thought through the potential consequences, that was a potentiality.
And the whole point,
it probably still seemed totally impossible to do because atoms are infinitesimally small.
And the whole point was to try and find a source of energy. Yeah. And when the sheer scale of the energy released was known, that was when it was weaponized. Because it's like, okay, we can use this for other purposes. The original idea was, okay, does the maths actually work in the way we think it works? And the only way to figure that out and to find that out is through experimentation. That's what the scientific method is all about. So unless you experiment, you won't actually know whether your hypothesis is correct or not.
I don't really agree with the notion that you can't know whether or not something should or shouldn't be done prior to doing it, because
I agree. I was overgeneralizing, Sister Danger. I mean, I don't have to have someone shove a cucumber up my butt to know I wouldn't like it.
I guess. I mean, this kind of comes back to the point that I think I was. At least it rolls into some of my original point was just that to say that he shouldn't have done the thing that he did. Well, I mean, I would be asking questions like, who is being harmed in the making? Are any animals being harmed in the making of this film? If the answer is no, then now what's the next objection to why it shouldn't be done?
As far as I'm concerned, he should have done what he did.
Well, and what's interesting here a little bit, Joe was saying that, you can't be doing science without moral and ethical guidelines. Well, some of those guidelines in that day were that it was highly immoral to be going around digging up bodies because you're desecrating the dead, you're fucking around with their soul, or doing a whole bunch of other things. And as well as, if nothing else, at a minimum, you're trespassing on someone else's property, you are vandalizing or in some other way, shape, or form defacing somebody else's property, being whoever owns that gravesite, whoever is responsible for that corpse, etc., etc. So you have all of these, and that is breaking the law. Yeah. So it is definitely not ethical because it is actually breaking the law to even get to that point. But we all agree, though, that kind of medical experimentation had to have been done on corpses. I mean, nowadays we look back with our little 2020 hindsight and we're like, how dumb, like, who cares? The body's dead, right? Not harming anybody. But at the time, that was a really big deal. Right. And they had to break the law to do it. And so sometimes science has to go outside of that.
That's why
I'm going to disagree though, because because you say that they had to break the law. Well, it would have been possible somewhere in the world to try to change the laws or go places that the law wasn't such that they had to do what they did. So it was expedient for them to do it, but they didn't have to do it.
I think it was a lot harder back then for them to just go other places in the world. I mean, nowadays, if I want to make art with human bones, I order them from India, where it's okay. I'm not even a joke. Like, you cannot sell American like body parts at all. Like, it's illegal to do without, like, unless you're in the medical industry or maybe in like college, university, because they use them for various studies and whatnot. But as a regular person, you can't. But I can if I buy them from India and just have Amazon ship them here.
Right. But the whole thing is now, like, remember, India was a British colony at the time that we're talking. So, and doctors did go to India. They did go to China. So they certainly could have gone, because I would bet that there was not the prohibition back then either. So I bet you they could have gone there and gotten specimens in those countries. They just chose not to.
So, and I would argue that it isn't just about the possibility of animals being harmed, or causing that kind of harm when trying to, like, dig up a corpse and to reanimate it. I mean, it's also unethical because you have no idea what kind of pain you could be causing to the corpse if you're successful.
What?
I mean, it's pretty cruel. What do you mean, what?
Sorry.
You dig up a body, you run along
after it becomes a live and feeling creature, and it then could be in pain. And
well, that is the end. That is the hopefully the end result of the experiment that you're doing. So then you would have to have, before you start, some idea of what that end result is going to mean for the subject. I mean, if you don't give a shit about the pain that the subject is feeling, then then have at it. But it's not ethical.
So based on the fact that it could feel pain, you shouldn't do it.
Well, if you're attempting to reanimate someone, then you're bringing them back to life. So yeah, they would feel, if it's possible to bring somebody back to life, then they would feel pain, because living people can feel pain.
So we should not reanimate.
The ethical line that's being crossed there is consent, because a corpse cannot give consent, however grateful it may be afterwards.
With the concept of a corpse cannot give consent reminds me of a slightly related topic. I know I'm changing this up a little bit, but what do y'all think about organ donation? Should doctors or hospitals or whatever, if you die in a hospital and you don't have any instructions, should they just be able to harvest all your functioning organs for other people?
No, I would say no, because consent is not a passive thing. Consent is an active thing. So
okay, but if you're dead, you can't give or deny consent if you're dead.
Right, but that's why you put that on your ID or your license or whatever. There are programs for that, or you can get bracelets or necklaces, or there's all sorts of ways you can be identified.
The reason I'm bringing this up is because I'm pretty sure in the UK, Brian, they were talking about doing it the other way around. Rather than having you say, I want to donate my organs,
you have to opt out.
Default position that you have to opt out of donating your organs.
Yeah. Now, I used to be an organ donator. I used to carry the card, but with my ME and shit, it's not something I can do anymore. Nobody would want it.
Yeah.
So the discussion you're talking about, yes, that has been proposed. I don't know whether it actually took effect, but the problem I see it is situations like mine. If the default is to do it or opt out, and I don't bother to opt out, somebody could end up with something that is not good for their body.
Right.
Well, I mean, they cross match and they look at the. I mean, they would probably figure it out. But the thing is that
obviously, it would take a while.
But they have to spend resources figuring out whether or not it's any value.
Exactly.
And that's the thing. I mean, to me, my body is the only thing that I'll ever own forever. So yeah, I think that you should have to opt in. I don't think opting out, forcing you to opt out is the right way to do it. That said, I do think that I think the ethical thing is for everyone who has harvestable organs to be a donor. like in Brian's case, like he said, his organs really aren't, good. Mine wouldn't be either.
Sure.
But if you have harvestable organs and you're and all that, you probably should be a donor.
Are you an organ donor, Sister Danger? Hello? I think she's frozen.
She's frozen. Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Raven? Are you an organ donor?
I can't be.
No.
HIV.
Oh, of course. I should have known that. Yeah.
So either Raven or Sister Danger is frozen, or she's really, really good at pouting.
No, she's totally frozen.
Or she's asleep.
I don't know what to do about it, but yeah. I've thought about donating organs for my whole adult life. My son tried to talk me into getting an organ donor card a little while, about 10 years ago, I guess now, because he's got one, and he's like, come on, Dad, it's the right thing to do. You're not using your organs anymore. And like, I can't really describe it. It's irrational. That's why. There's a part of me that just wants to like die complete with my complete body and have my complete body incinerated as one complete body, and because I'm done with it. But on the other hand, it just makes sense that if you can extend someone's life by donating even a portion, say, of your liver to someone, because livers grow back, and that's something else I've considered doing, is maybe donating part of my liver to somebody who has a problem with theirs. Oh, there she is.
Don't even know what happened. Like,
yeah, that was really weird.
Like my Chrome just crashed. So away with me.
So Mr. Danger, when you crashed, your face was just like happened to be in the right position, so it looked like you were like in a pout face, and so I said that way you were gone. Either your internet froze or you're the best powder that we can find.
No, well, okay. So my answer to the original question, because I assume you guys kind of move on, but I think there's actually 3 different things here. There's a opt-in, like I actively opt in, yes. I actively opt out, no, and a kind of a non-applicable where there is no answer. Somebody dies, they go to the hospital. We don't know if they are yes or a no. In which case, what should the hospital be able to do? Should they be able to harvest for organs? And in the case where we do not know, so I think that people should have to actively choose yes or no, because either one of those creates a different kind of ethical situation and fallout. But in the case where nobody knows, I think the answer should be no, because if the answer is yes, it now has this effect of creating motivation for altering records or things that happen after death in order to. So let's say my answer is an unknown or whatever. Now I could, for example, if I was an unethical doctor, harvest your organs, right? And then I could answer the yes portion of your medical records for you, since there wasn't an answer, and then I could turn around and sell your organs on a black market, thereby profiting myself, right? So I think that if there is a not an answer, the answer should be a default no as opposed to a default yes, because of what people can do and the motivation that it gives them to try to game the system for personal gain. Yeah, I'm done.
Because I can't, carry a donor card anymore. In the interests of trying to help others, I've decided to donate mine to medical research.
That's a good middle point, isn't it? Really?
Yeah.
Because you're still getting use out of them, but not necessarily surviving somebody.
Exactly. Ideally, though, what I would, because you talked about, something wholesome in the thought of being buried whole, as a whole corpse. In that vein, for me, the ideal disposal would be as carrion somewhere in a rainforest.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
Just sort of, tossed out of a plane as you're flying over the Amazon.
Yeah, and picked apart by critters. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
or left in the Florida Everglades or something.
Like, I guess that really the concern that I would think of, which is why it should be a default no, is because of how that could otherwise be abused. But there's a lot of ways to get around that. Some of those things that you're saying could be great ways to get around that, right? So in the answer of we don't know, maybe if it just automatically then went to medical science, right? Can't be used for any kind of transplant or anything like that, but could be used for study, right? Or plant a tree, right?
Presuming that the family doesn't have any preference.
Well, right. I guess that when I think of there isn't an answer here, it's a we don't know question. That means that there is nobody to claim the body, like a homeless person, for example. No one to claim the body. We don't know who they are. They have no, cards or anything that say that kind of stuff. What do we do?
In the event of John Doe, in other words.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Wow. Well, you know how I mentioned a moment ago how I would prefer to be disposed of intact. And then when you said, Brian, about donating parts to medical research, I forgot about that, basically, because I have considered, and this might sound flippant, but I'm being totally serious. I mean, I have considered donating my brain, because not just donating my brain, but with a log of all my intoxication history, because
Timothy Leary.
Seriously, because they don't necessarily know these things when someone donates that particular organ, and therefore they wouldn't have any reason to be looking for this or for looking for that, or what there more of this or less of that. You know what I mean? But I mean, there was a period of time when I was quite the psychonaut, and I don't know if that leaves any physical traces on the brain. I'm not sure if they know. So maybe that's something I might think about.
Actually,
one thought.
Paul,
sorry, Joe.
Yeah, it's one thing you made me think of is I mentioned. I'm sure I mentioned. I know some of you know this about my extra coronary artery.
Yeah,
it would be interesting, for them to be able to study that and try to see if it was something genetic or if it was just an anomaly, in utero anomaly, or what. And what, when I die, what state my heart is in, and all that, because they
in order to find out if it's genetic, wouldn't they have to have some kind of an autopsy on your ancestors as well? Or you don't have any natural children of your own, Joe, so they wouldn't be able to check that way either.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the other question is, I wonder, I would like to talk to my father's. There was a surgeon, like near the end of his life. He had some problems, and he did have surgery on his heart, and I'd love to find out who the surgeon was and say, hey, while you were there,
don't suppose you saw a third ventricle, did you?
Yeah, did you happen to notice anything? Because that's what I have, and did he have it? Because if he did have it, then then almost certainly would be hereditary. Yeah.
Well, Joe, you're an example of evolution in progress, right? Because you have an extra bit there.
Yep. Either that, or it's all that's left of his vestigial twin.
Weird.
They kind of funny. My vestigial twin. All that's left of him is a.
All that's left is the artery. Yeah.
Hey, friends, I want to wrap up the show around about the 3-hour mark. So is there any pressing issues that we haven't talked about that we've actually missed out that we should really cover?
Only one from me, but I'll let everybody else go first.
Well, the only one I could think of, actually, Vegas mentioned the Supreme Court. Basically, they didn't overturn the vaccine mandate, but they put a stay on it.
Right.
And, the thing is that, of course, the right-wing sphere is all happy about that. But the interesting thing is that just because, even if they decide, if they end up, finalizing and saying, no, you can't have the mandate, although I suspect that they probably won't, because we've had federal vaccine mandates before. But the thing about it is that doesn't stop companies from doing it themselves. I mean, basically, the mandate was from the federal government to corporations. It wasn't on individuals. It was basically telling companies, if you don't have this for your company, we're going to sanction you. So now, okay, the sanction goes away, but companies that want to do it can and will still do it.
Right. I see. I have such mixed feelings about this because on the one hand, I want people to get vaccinated, but I don't. I find myself sounding like a right winger sometimes because I see things that people say, and I'm thinking, well, I actually agree with that philosophically, right? But in terms of the practical application, I'm not so sure where I'm at. But like, for example, I saw just go by my Twitter feed that someone had a banner, a sign that said, "Freedom and mandates don't mix," or something like that. And I'm thinking, well, kind of, yeah. But I mean, you could draw that further to say all laws are contrary to freedom, right? Because any law behavior. Huh?
The perfect example of that, okay, is the mandate for a driving license that actually gives you the freedom of the roads.
Yeah.
No, you don't have the freedom to drive in America. Driving is a privilege in America, not a right.
It's true.
Yeah, but to do that, you have a you have a mandated driving license.
Yeah.
Right,
and
right.
that gives you the freedom of the road.
David, what were you going to say? You were trying to say?
Yeah, I was just saying we can mandate freedom.
Well, see, here's the other thing about it too, though, is I disagree with that sign you saw wherever it was written, because it's based on the assumption that all freedoms are absolute, and they're not.
I totally agree with that, Joe. And like I said, if you take it to its logical extreme, you're Ayn Rand. I mean, basically, Ayn Rand was saying that all laws are contrary to freedom. A free man won't obey the law, she used to say, because in order to be free, you can't be constricted by anything. Right. And we obviously have to have laws. So right. I get it. I'm not, but it's just a little uncomfortable for me. That's all there is to it. It's just a little uncomfortable. I'm not saying I necessarily think it's right or wrong. I just think there's a creep to it that I don't like, where it's just yet another tiny thing that's just, I don't know.
I mean, this is one of those ones. I mean, sometimes I'm with you on it. This one I'm not, because I'm kind of like, basically what it really comes down to is, does freedom give you the right to make somebody else ill? Does it have you the right to kill another person? I think we probably both agree the answer is no.
I think we don't agree on that. I think the answer should be no. But the fact is that's not how it works. And I'm not going to make a whole bunch of bad examples like driving and other stuff that I've heard other people make, because I don't want the conversation to go that way. But where I'm coming from with this, Joe, is like I say, I recognize that all laws are restrictive, and you have to have some restrictions for people to live together in a civil society. I grant all those things. But the point I wanted to make to Vegas in the comments was, he seemed to think that the Supreme Court's decision this past week was kind of inevitable and predictable. I don't agree, because we live in a country where for the past 35 years, your employer has been able to demand your urine off of you. And the Supreme Court has said that that's okay. If they can make you hand over your piss to show that you're not taking illegal drugs when you're not even at work, how do people think that they don't have the right to tell you to get a vaccine? You see what I'm saying? And we've already basically given our employers that level of imperiousness over us, I guess. They can demand our blood is clean from illegal drugs, even though we're not taking them at work. Go ahead. I'm going to shut up now. Let someone else talk.
So what I understand is the mandates were mandates that were on employers of a certain size, that all of their employees are vaccinated, or if not, because that's the thing, is that they didn't have to be vaccinated. It was either vaccinated or they submitted to testing to make sure that they were clean. So employees had an out. They weren't being forced to be vaccinated. Right. They did have an out, that they could have, opted out of the whole thing.
That depends on tests being readily available.
And it was but the employer then would have to make the tests readily available. But that was all being basically overseen and enforced by OSHA, correct? I mean, it was OSHA. Okay, so now I have worked in a number of different places, and OSHA regulations were always, you had to follow them. The idea that OSHA was going to come and inspect was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. But reports could be made. And if they could tell you that you can't lay a pallet, an empty pallet, on the floor because it's an OSHA violation, and you have to stand it up, then they can tell you that you have to be either vaccinated or take a test. I think it's just stupid to
Yeah, and that's the
I-
thing.
Like I say, if they can demand your blood or your urine off you, then you don't have any bodily autonomy from your employer. And if they can tell you that they're not going to pay for your birth control as well, that's another thing. You know what I mean? So your employer has a certain amount of sway.
But see, the thing is, it's simpler than that though, because again, just say we didn't have any of that, and we're just the first time we're having any kind of restrictions ever. The whole point is, okay, I'm an employer, because I'll say this, when you used to be an employer, but I'm an employer, so I've got employees under me. If someone coming into my building has the potential for getting other people within my building, other employees sick and taking them out of work and possibly even worse, and if also affecting my insurance rates, by the way, I certainly, as an employer, have the right to say you can't come in the fucking building, and if you're not vaccinated, at least you have a test with a recent test to prove that you're not going to infect us. And that's the part, like you said, Raven. I'm glad you brought that up about the testing, because that's critical. Is that no one was being forced to do anything they didn't want to do, and if they weren't willing to at least take a test, then they don't understand liberty, and they don't understand rights, because you don't have any absolute right to anything. And so you certainly don't have the right to go around spreading a disease because you don't want to take a test.
I'm afraid I've become a little bit more cynical. I do understand the quandary, and I feel it. Yeah. On the one hand, shouldn't you, freedom, blah, 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 yada, yada. But I've gotten to the point now where I consider it a Darwin Award. If you are that dead set against taking precautions for your own health and well-being, then you deserve to actually contract the thing and have all of the problems that come with it. As much as I would hate for you to go through that, I'm sorry, but you decided that was what you wanted to do, and that's what you've got.
right. It's like the lyrics to my favorite song. Right, my favorite song in the world is "If you're a Nazi, you lose your job. It's your fault." It's if you're a Nazi and you're fired, it's your fault. If you show up at the mob and you lose your fucking job, if you're a Nazi and you know it, it's your fault.
Well, and Brian, I largely feel the same way. But here's the one problem with it, because I was something I wrestle with myself. I have no compassion for people who are reckless and don't care what they do to others and if they get sick. However, the fact is, if it only affected them, then I could really take that position completely.
Agreed. That's why I fight with it.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're the breeding grounds for new versions or variants and vectors, and spreading it to people. Because we know even the best vaccine, they're never 100%. And the more you're exposed, even if you're vaccinated, the more you're exposed, eventually you'll have a breakthrough case. If you just keep getting exposed to the virus, you're going to get a breakthrough case.
I've now had 2 people in my immediate family, my sister and her husband, who have recently had COVID. One had Delta, the other's got Omicron.
Right.
And they are both double vaccinated and boosted.
Right.
Yeah.
Because but that means that there were people out there that they kept getting exposed.
Exactly.
And so it's these people, and so I'm kind of like, this is what I hate about right-wing libertarianism. I'm being very explicit because I know when I'm looser in the term, I upset Paul. But is that basically they have this fantasy dream that rights are absolute, and basically they want all the rights and none of the obligations of freedom. Freedom does not exist without obligation.
Yeah, the word rights should always come with the word responsibility right next to it.
Yeah. Exactly. And we as and somebody, and I remember having an argument with one libertarian. Well, I didn't agree to that. Well, then move out of the fucking society. Then you're not entitled to the benefits of society if you're not willing to take the obligations.
Yeah. Another word that ties well with freedoms is consequences.
You know, the problem with right-wing libertarians, a lot of them have this fantasy notion again of natural rights. And I'm going to use a line. It was in the John Adams HBO show. It was attributed to John Dickinson. He's not the one who said it, but I did look it up. Somebody did at the time did actually say it, so it's a real quote. I have looked for our rights in the laws of nature, and I found them only in political society. You know, we made rights up, and I'm glad we
absolutely.
did. And I'm so glad that we did, because what I would love to, I wish I could have met Ayn Rand, because if she told me that only an idiot follows the law, I would be like, okay, let's go, bitch. Because if there's no law, I can stab you in the fucking chest because I have the freedom to do that, right?
So yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like so many of them, what they want, what they're talking about when they say those kinds of things is they want ultimate freedom. And that's all fine and good. I mean, I think we would all kind of like that to an extent, but you can't have ultimate freedom and society at the same time.
Well, that's right. If you have ultimate freedom, you're a bird.
Yeah, I mean, like those two things, they can't coincide.
Or a muskrat.
Right. And this is the reason why typically a lot of right-wing libertarians, they pick up this ideology when they're young, and they tend to be male. Why? Because they're more physically fit. They're more able to protect themselves. So sure, if I'm walking around and if I'm thinking to myself 30 years ago, I was in better shape and I was a strong guy, no one's really going to mess with me. Yeah, it's real easy to think, but of course, what about Ethel, who's walking in the walker, who protects her? If everybody has the right to just go and knock her over and take her lunch money, no one stands up for her because in their anarchistic fantasy.
Yeah, you see, at the end of the day, I see it as a war of attrition. Yeah, the longer the viruses are around, okay. If you are vaccinated and boosted, you are much less likely to die, and also far less likely to have serious complications as a result of the disease. Whereas if you're not vaccinated, then you are probably going to have a hard time of it. You might survive, people do, but it's a war of attrition. Those that are vaccinated, those that are being conscientious, they are ultimately going to last longer and in greater numbers than those that stubbornly refuse to vaccinate and drop off one by one.
I agree with you, Brian. And the one thing that's is interesting, actually, Bo of the Fifth Column, I might have mentioned this in the previous week, talked about that because like only 7% of this is as of a few weeks ago, only 7% of Democrats were unvaccinated and like 40% of Republicans were unvaccinated. That the disparity in the death rates is such that it may actually start affecting elections this coming fall in places where it's been close in the past. That you just by simple attrition, that there are just fewer red people to vote. And actually in Vegas, the non-aggression principle sounds nice, but they don't actually believe in it because the non-aggression principle would actually necessitate regulation. The whole point of that is regulation is to draw the lines to say when your actions are, committing force against another.
Too aggressive,
right? Yeah. Because it's impossible for us to live and not affect one another. It's a matter of where do we draw a line and say that that's too much. When are you committing force to the level against others that they have the right to sanction you? And that's what regulation is all about.
Yeah. And the non-aggression principle is nice in principle, because it's like, my freedom to throw a fist in your direction stops the instant that your skin feels the contact of my fist.
Right.
Yeah. So as long as I pull my punch, we're all good.
Right.
Yeah. But here's the thing.
Theoretically, anyway.
Theoretically, yeah. But here's the thing. In the real world, people don't pull their punches.
Right. Yeah, we're all smacking each other in the face constantly all the time. It's just a matter of at what level does the blunt force trauma get onerous?
Right.
Yeah. And if you want to exercise your ultimate freedom to self-determine that you don't want this poison in your body, then yeah, you also have the freedom to reap the consequences of that decision.
And especially since I heard a lot of people say, earlier on when they were like, well, if you're afraid of getting sick, then you should stay home. I'm like, well, no, the rest of us are all doing the responsible thing. You stay home if you don't want to.
Well,
Hell, I'm double vaxxed and boosted, and I stay home.
Well, I'm double vaxxed and boosted, and compared to my previous life, I have no social life whatsoever, and I already had no social life when I lived in England. But I see family now, which is great. We drive instead of fly because that's the only way to. Basically, if you get on one of those canoes and 100 people get on, at least 3 of them are going to have COVID, which means 10 people are going to get off with COVID, right? At least 10, maybe more with the Omicron. Anyway, so we drive. And we always wear masks when we go in shops. We have followed the rules assiduously, the recommendations assiduously. And I still had COVID. I still got COVID in August. Thankfully, it wasn't very severe, but now I feel like I ought to feel totally like invincible, but I don't, because I've been fed this steady stream of, you can't do it. You can't do it. You can't do it for so long. I find myself second guessing myself in ways that 2 years ago I would have been ashamed of myself for.
Well, remember though, Paul, is we know like from different variants, like Omicron, apparently double vaxxed only gives you like a 35% resistance to Omicron, and double vaxxed and boosted it's like 75. So even double vaxxed, boosted, and having had it in the past, but you had an earlier variant, you're probably maybe 80, 85. So you're still vulnerable. That's the whole thing. It's not as vulnerable.
We're all still vulnerable because these vaccinations were never meant to prevent you from getting it in the first place. And that's why they shouldn't really be called vaccinations. They should be called something else. They should be,
mitigation.
I'm not even complaining about that, because this was brought in as an emergency measure because basically we had to do something to stop people from dying.
It's the same as every other vaccination, though.
Except for most vaccinations prevent you from getting the illness, or they don't. No vaccination is 100% effective in the same way that a condom isn't, or a birth control pill isn't 100% effective, right? Some vaccinations, I got measles when I was 3 and I was already vaccinated.
This vaccination
same here
can prevent you from the disease. Metastasizing is the wrong word, but I'm going to use that word.
You have to be with any vaccination. You have to be infected with the virus for the vaccination to work.
Well, that's what see, Raven, that's actually right. A vaccination has part of the dead virus in it, or whatever, which is why the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine was actually a vaccine, whereas the RNA vaccines aren't really vaccines. Vaccines have dead material in them.
But they don't have to.
No, that's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. To be vaccinated against, like, if you are vaccinated against the flu, it doesn't mean you will not be infected with the flu.
I get it.
It means you're not going to get sick with the flu. Yeah, right. None of them are 100%. Like, in order for the vaccine to work, after you're vaccinated, right, you need to be infected with whatever it is, the virus. The virus, it's not like a shield around you. The virus still has to go into your system,
of course,
for the vaccine to protect you. Do you know what I mean?
Fine.
Good.
Yeah, there's another word that could be useful, because what Paul's saying, yeah, there is a distinction between a vaccine such as the AstraZeneca, yeah, and the mRNA stuff. Now, the word that I would propose, inoculation.
Well, but see, that applies. But here's the thing. Here's why it's still a vaccination. So what the RNA thing does is the virus has a telltale spike on it. And all vaccines basically teach your body to recognize this thing as an intruder. So this still does the same thing, but now instead of taking the risk of putting dead virus in your body, it's just showing that spike.
Oh, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, it's a better way of giving it the pattern to match.
So it's still a vaccination. It's just that we're not giving you the entire virus. We're giving you a copy of a section of the virus. So the thing is that, and actually it can prevent, and again, I don't know the right word, but I'm going to say, I say metastasize because I think you know what it means for a cancer to metastasize. So the way viruses spread is it literally tricks your own DNA into making copies, and it fills up a cell, and the cell explodes, and then it spreads on to all the surrounding cells, and so on and so on. So it is possible if your immune system has been taught to recognize that spike and say, this is an intruder, those things can attack the virus and destroy it and disable it before it tricks your cells into replicating. It's possible for that to happen. So it is a vaccination in that regard.
Okay, I'm with you, but I still like the word inoculation.
Well, and that applies as well. I mean,
exactly.
So somebody both verbs. Somebody who deals with a virus nonstop, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for more than a decade now. But what Joe said about how a virus works, and that's exactly what it does. And like in the case of like HIV, it uses the cells and to replicate until it kills the cell.
Right.
And moves on to the next. That's exactly what it does. It turns your cells into factories.
Yeah.
Similarly,
which is actually how we can do genetic tracing with ERVs, endogenous retroviruses. So basically, these are deactivated, the remnants of deactivated viruses that are in our cells. And everybody has there's at least 4 common ones that every human being has. And then there's 2 that are specific, ones to the people in like Southeast Asia and one's specific to people in Northern Africa. But basically, if you get a virus and some of your gamete cells, your ova or your sperm cells get infected, and then the virus gets defeated, and then you have children and you pass those ERVs on to your offspring, and now they've got a copy of the virus you had.
Yeah.
It's not going to do anything, but it's there, and that's one of the ways that they do genetic.
I think something that I'm kind of surprised they haven't really been mentioning during the pandemic at all, and nowadays with all these tests that we've got, I'm not so sure how much I trust the tests. And what I mean by that is we already know that there's a phenomenon of false positives and false negatives, and home testing. I'm sorry, I just don't think the home test can give you the same kind of accuracy the lab tests can give you.
No, but it can give you a clue. It can give you an idea.
But here's the thing. Any one of us at any given time, at any time of the year, is carrying a certain amount of viruses and other illnesses that our antibodies are just naturally fighting off all the time. And I'm wondering if these tests pick up just coronaviruses, or if they're actually the home tests I'm talking about. I know lab tests, they're testing for SARS-CoV-2. I know that for sure. But I don't know if the home tests are just testing for coronaviruses, because coronaviruses are all over the frickin' place,
Okay, well, I've taken a few tests. All of them have been negative so far. And yes, false positive, false negative, taken into consideration. But with ME, one of the things that my particular pathology has, I have a couple of viruses that are dormant in my system, and occasionally they flare up. And Exiled has something similar as well going on. Occasionally something will flare up. Yeah, you get a breakout. Herpes is another one that will sit there dormant and flare up occasionally. So there's all sorts of different types of viral activity. And if those tests were picking up viral activity per se, then I would have probably shown positive at some point.
So about actually a couple of things. Vegas, I want to get to that, by the way. So a couple of things, so every year most people get 1 or 2, sometimes 3 colds, right? Some people even get more. About 25% of the colds that the average person gets in a year are caused by coronaviruses. There's like a couple of different virus families. Like the common cold, there's no such thing as the common cold. The common cold is a collection of different viruses, coronavirus being one of them, one of the most common. So like if you were to grab a can of Lysol from 10 years ago, it'll say right on the front, kills coronavirus, because they're not new. It's not like all of a sudden there's always known about coronaviruses. So I don't know how specific home testing would be then, because I agree. Is it the home test going to pick up a coronavirus that's just, a regular home?
Well, the thing is, my understanding, and it could be wrong, that they're looking for specific antibodies that are resultant from SARS-CoV-2 being in your body. So whether or not
that's the antigen test, though, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's a lot of people for the home test rapid antigen. Yeah, that's and I actually have one here.
There you go. I've got a bunch of lateral flow tests in the cupboard. Now, I don't know if it's searching for antigens or proteins, but yeah, that's another thing that viruses will do. They'll produce telltale proteins.
Change the subject a little, just so, even if it's only for a minute.
Sure.
So, okay, so Vegas's comment down there, you are a virus, Agent Smith. So, okay, in the most recent Matrix movie, Agent Smith is played by a different actor, and it's the whole story is kind of weird and twisted, and he no longer calls Neo Mr. Anderson. He calls him Tom. I've got questions about why, because
I've not seen this movie.
The Matrix is the original movie, the first movie.
I've seen.
I can't say about the next two, but the first movie is a trans allegory, and the fourth movie was made by the same people. It was Lana Wachowski made it. So if the first one was a trans allegory, and then number 4 is a continuation of the story she was telling. If she had Agent Smith calling Neo Mr. Anderson as a way of dead naming Neo, because that's what it was, right? Every time Agent Smith said Mr. Anderson, you got upset, and that was good. You were supposed to get upset because it was dead naming. It's supposed to bother you. When now in the new one, Smith is calling him Tom. And this is something that's been like rolling around in my brain. What is that supposed to represent? Any ideas, anybody?
Before we do, at some point, Raven, you and I are going to have to talk about this, because this is a subplot that I completely missed.
Yeah, it's an allegory. It's an allegory for being trans. It's a transgender allegory, and I think that's amazing. I think that's fantastic. And like I said, Agent Smith saying Mr. Anderson is akin to him dead naming Neo, and it's supposed to be a hateful act. It's supposed to make you angry as a viewer because he's intentionally using his name to harm him. That's what he's doing. So in the new movie, he doesn't call him Mr. Anderson. He calls him Tom. And I'm wondering if that's on purpose. Like, part of me thinks maybe what that's supposed to be is he's still dead naming him, but he's friendly about it. And it's kind of like a faux acceptance. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, I'm not going to be formal and be a bitch about it and call you, Mr. Anderson. I'm going to be your buddy and still dead name you and still call you Tom.
Or
right,
is this
Paige? Thank you, Paige. Right, Paige. Tom is dead naming, but it's more intimate. Exactly. Yes. Thank you. That's what I was thinking.
Or maybe this artificial intelligence is becoming more human.
Maybe it could have been that too, actually.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of them, so.
Yeah, I haven't seen 4 yet. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, like when you watch The Matrix, the first one, when you watch it with the lens that most people watched it through, is that it's like a philosophical porn almost. It's a really cool movie. Everything changes when you watch it through the lens of transgender allegory, though, because everything
I'm
takes
gonna
meaning.
I'm gonna have to do that now.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, while you're watching Matrix stuff with interest, this is totally off the subject, but if you put on the animated movie Animatrix and start it at the same time you start Enema by Tool, and turn the sound down on the movie, obviously, and listen to the album while you watch the movie, you will not believe how much it syncs up. It's shocking. It's
Really?
shocking, and it's better than the one they did with the Wizard of Oz and Dark Side of the Moon by a mile.
Excellent.
And I love that song, because it's allegorical as well. There's a lot of things going on, and because obviously it sounds like what it literally sounds like, but it's also talking about the how we got so desensitized in society, and how we're and it's funny because you think about it, that song came out in the 90s.
You got to listen to the whole album and watch the movie, though. Yeah, it's a great song, though.
But if that song, you listen to that song and you think about, that was in the 90s, and he was basically warning us, and we are to that point now where we are so disconnected and so numb, and the fact that people need, like, to the point where we, TikTok videos, 15-second videos. Oh, yeah, I can't handle anything more than 15 seconds. Stupid. And it's a bunch of ridiculous bullshit. And, but yeah, we need that constant stimulation, and that's why nobody watches like any actual real news anymore, because it's all entertainment, because no one can handle not being stimulated for more than 15 seconds.
Yeah.
I
Actually,
don't watch any news.
Speaking of which, Paul, at some point, if you're up for it, if you're not, that's fine. But at some point, if you would, I'd like you to put together for me a 2-hour set, something that's bass heavy.
Okay.
Yeah, sort of electronica type stuff.
Electronica.
Electronica. Well, it doesn't have to be reggae, dubstep, dance music, EDM. As long as it's sort of got a good oomph in the bass.
Yeah,
it
I can dig
works.
it, man.
Yeah. Reason being, because I'd like to feature you as kind of like a guest spot. Yeah, sort of like
how could I possibly say
a
no?
guest playlist.
How could I possibly say no when you've just like greased my ego on all sides? I mean, how could I possibly say no?
That was an image.
Okay, that would be awesome.
Yeah, cool.
And I have to go. It's 4:15 here. I'm way past falling asleep time. I just want to throw you a little snippet of British politics, Paul. Just something to whet your speculative juices a little bit.
Go on.
There is talk at the moment of whether or not the Queen has the constitutional power to sack Boris Johnson, given his flagging popularity, incompetence, and all this other shit that's been going on recently with parties and all this lying and other bullshit.
Well, I personally would be in favor of anything that got rid of Boris Johnson, not just because I think he's a detestable person, which I do think that. I mean, like, having lived in the UK for 31 years, I have a very good impression of what people must have thought when they found out that while people were not able to go to their children's funerals or their parents' funerals or have weddings or anything like that,
they're whooping it up
on Downing Street like there's no tomorrow. And so when the people in America, we just go, oh, our politicians are all corrupt, and we shrug it off and we move on. We got to get some gas. We got to get the kids from school. And,
here
Britain,
we still try and maintain.
Different.
We try and maintain a semblance of culpability here.
But over there, though, I mean, you're kind of stuck with Boris. If he doesn't resign, you're stuck. You only voted him in a year and a half ago. Getting rid of him has to happen by his own party bringing out the knives, and that's a really unfortunate aspect of British political system.
But the Queen,
the only way to get rid of the prime minister during his term or her term is if their own party does it. And the beautiful thing I think about that, Brian, is that in Britain, I think here comes Michael. In Britain, the politicians have the will to go, you know what? You're in my way, and they draw out the daggers, and if they're going to bring down Margaret Thatcher over much less, then the Tory party themselves should be getting rid of Johnson. It can't be up to the Queen. It would cause too many constitutional issues for one thing, and for another thing,
not really, because it's still a constitutional monarchy, and she does have some constitutional powers. And in the face of this,
prime minister twice. So,
and in the face of this level of incompetence, she would be neglecting her responsibilities if she didn't step in.
Well, good question though. Couldn't they have a no confidence vote?
They could, but his own party, they're up to their necks in it with him. That's the problem,
right?
And this is why we're looking to other solutions.
So yeah, I was going to say it's the same problem we had here with Trump. Is that basically, we twice and couldn't get a conviction because his own party is in on the malfeasance.
Exactly. Hello, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
So I would like to change the subject and ask Mike a question. This is, I think, very important stuff. Mike, did you just watch a football game at home and wear that shirt?
He did.
Okay.
He preferred sports ball to us.
Have you never watched Star Trek with your Star Trek uniform on, your communicator and all that?
Everybody's done that.
No. I don't own one.
I don't have a uniform.
I wish. Oh my God! I wish. I want a Starfleet uniform. I really do.
They don't make them in my size. Damn it!
I think Mr. Danger can hook you up with some Spock ears.
Yeah. It's a ritualistic thing that people do that I think is just really freaking weird.
Have I had the Steelers flag up in my room for the past week because they got in the playoffs? Yes.
Damn it, Mike! I'm an engineer, not a. Oh.
I'm wearing.
Anyway,
we're not even playing.
And I'm wearing this.
Yay, sports ball.
There you go. Like I went to a Guns N' Roses concert.
That is the logo from an album that I actually have a track on.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool. Hey, I wanted to end the show pretty soon, but now Michael's here, so I'm gonna have to kick it a bit longer. But what do you all think about the Chinese going ahead with the Olympics?
I don't ever care about the Olympics, so I still don't care.
It's not about caring about the Olympics, Joe. The point of the question is they're setting this example that it really doesn't matter, but they're taking loads of precautions, but they're still having it anyway. And I'm just wondering if this is exactly why people aren't taking this stuff seriously, is because people in authority or people in power are, just doing it anyway.
But there are still international flights. There are still rock concerts. There are still movies and shows and everything else. So if you can do all that, why can't they have? I don't see a difference. I don't see.
Oh, you've made my point for me, because should we be doing all that still? I mean,
probably not.
I know this might be an unpopular opinion, okay, except for with Vegas. Vegas is probably in there. I can't believe Paul said that, but I mean, like, seriously. If Omicron, you've all seen the spike when the Omicron variant came up just before Christmas. It was virtually vertical, right? If there was that level, and Omicron is less serious than Delta in quotation marks, but Delta shouldn't be the benchmark for a serious or non-serious infection of it's still, Omicron is still deadly, right?
Yeah.
So bottom line is we've had a vertical spike. Most schools are still open or trying to stay open. Most businesses are still open or trying to stay open. And like Raven pointed out, there's concerts, there's movies, there's all this stuff going on. Society's more or less normal despite this massive spike. And I know the conditions are different because of vaccines, but I still believe that if Trump was president and we're behaving the exact same way, people would be barking like mad. You know what I mean? I mean, if taking the CDC thing, when they revised their thing from 10 days to 5 days, if Trump was president when they did that, everybody would be bitching about how it was a political decision. And you know what? They admitted it's a political decision. When Biden's president, it's a political decision, and that's somehow excusable. But when Trump was president, it wasn't excusable.
Well, I don't think it's okay either, though. That's the whole thing. I don't think.
Well, me too, Joe. I'm on the same page. You know what I mean?
But the thing here's the fact of it is, Americans are selfish, and we stopped giving a fuck. That's just. I mean, I'm not happy about that, but that seems to be the case. That we've just stopped giving a fuck for the most part. And we're basically like, we want to go back to life, and if that means many of us die, we don't care.
Which powers at that point.
Yeah, Vegas mentioned earlier about the nurses who test positive for COVID are being told to come back to work. It doesn't matter if you're positive for COVID. We need you in the hospital.
Yeah, the powers that be have already taken it for granted. They've conceded that everybody is going to get this thing, so let's just fucking carry on. Yeah, so that those of us that are left still have a functioning society.
So in March,
simple as that.
In March is my birthday. My birthday is coming up in March. It'll be my third birthday in a pandemic. So that's to give you an idea of how long it's been. Whether people like it or not, we have to have a functioning society in some way. I think if Joe Biden had walked out to out to a microphone and said something like, "Hey, everybody's gonna get it. I mean, even if they do inject the bleach, I think he would get the mockery that Trump got for 4 years for being Trump. So I don't think it's hypocritical. I don't think it's the same thing. And there have been times where Trump even still says things that are coherent and intelligent, and I applaud him for it, as much as I would like to see him drop off the face of the earth.
Yeah, and when he says it, his own people boo him,
which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I'd actually want to point out again, because every time this comes up, at least in the States, I know it's different in some other places, we did not have any lockdowns in the United States. We had shelter in place. There was no mandated lockdown. We should stop calling it lockdown because it wasn't a fucking lockdown. And
okay, right. I mean, the point was we weren't very far into restricting behavior before before they finally got their guns and went marching to the Capitol. I think that's the ultimate point.
But that makes it actually worse, though, because we weren't actually in an actual lockdown. We were just mildly inconvenienced.
Yeah, they weren't in a national lockdown, but people couldn't get their hair cut, Joe, and they couldn't go to the gym. Man, these things are important.
We had a lockdown. We had two.
Right.
That's right. When I was living in the UK, there was a hard lockdown.
Yeah, that's why I limited my comments to the United States. Because I know Australia did too, at least in certain places.
Yeah.
But here in the US,
and it sucked. It sucked.
Hey, North Korea, they got a lockdown too.
But you know what? The numbers proved. Okay, yeah, we our numbers are fucked, but they're a lot less fucked than they would have been had we not had those lockdowns.
The first one especially. The first lockdown really helped.
That first one particularly, yes.
South Korea and Japan, where they had way more draconian than most of where we live, and they're basically like almost clean of the virus. They have almost nobody.
Well, I invite everybody here after the show to look at the statistics for Taiwan. Yeah. I mean, and you look at Taiwan and you're thinking, okay, it's practically a horizontal line, except for when the Delta spike happened in the summer.
Right.
And and you think, okay, what are they doing in Taiwan that we're not doing? And it was pointed out to me, and the person who pointed this out to me said it in a derisory way. They said, "Oh well, over there the population is more compliant with rules." And they said that like it was a really bad thing, like you're just a bunch of sheep and you're just doing what you're told and whatever. But I mean, like, look at their
there is a cultural difference though, and that would be factual. And they're more used to wearing masks. It's more part of their culture to socially distance, to and also to stare at people. They stare at people. I don't know why.
And a big part of it again is because their culture is definitely more group oriented than we are. We are so hyper individualistic in the United States that we're basically willing to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of people because I want to go to the mall.
Right.
And let's be real here. Over there's a lot less science denial.
A lot less what?
A lot less science denial.
There's a lot less science denial over there. Just like in the United States. In the United States, there's a lot less science in some places.
Right.
Yeah. And the same is true here. We have a huge contingent of people who say, I don't trust the scientists. I don't trust it. Blah, 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 blah. I believe the politicians. I believe my pundit.
So, okay, I've only seen memes because I haven't been watching any news because I'm just, the entire state of everything has gotten me very down. I'm not in a good place. So I've been avoiding the news. I'm watching the Marvel movies. I'm watching them in chronological order according to Disney, which is kind of cool. Just kind of sucks that Spider-Man's not on the list. So I got to figure out where he fits in, and I got to go hunt him down. And anyway, so I've been avoiding the news because of that. So I've only seen memes about it. People are drinking their own piss.
Yeah. This is what's funny to me.
Yeah.
So I don't want to take the vaccine because woo scary, but I'll drink my own fucking urine because some dipshit on the internet said I should. What the fuck?
Hey man, urine's totally free and infinitely accessible.
Yeah, I'm not gonna.
There's
no big urine, right? Yeah.
and it's sterile.
Well, not necessarily. If you have
not if you have an infection, obviously, but.
So from what I understand, I don't know anything about. I know actually a little bit, unfortunately, about the Spider-Man movie. I wanted to avoid all spoilers, and I've learned that's like avoiding COVID-19 Omicron variant. You can't avoid it. It's going to affect you. So I've actually seen, or not seen. I've heard some spoilers about the movie, and from what I heard, though, it is probably the best Marvel movie made to date.
Everybody says that, but I'm gonna have to wait for
which one are you talking?
Disney Plus, because
the new Spider-Man.
I'm not going into a cinema right now.
It's not. It won't be on Disney Plus for a long time. It's going to be on Netflix. Well, it's going to be on Stars first, and then Netflix, and then it'll be on Disney Plus. But it's going to be a while.
I'll tell you what, Eternals is already on Disney Plus, and it was only in the cinema.
Yeah, but the Spider-Man movies are on Disney Plus, though. None of them.
Because remember, Sony owns the rights. Marvel.
Yeah, but I thought the new Spider-Man with Tom Holland was Marvel.
It is, but Sony still owns the rights.
It's a collaboration. It's a Marvel Sony collaboration.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yes. Oh no. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And Sony have a sphincter that's tighter than Joe's smallest washer.
So Green Machine is muted. There's no spoilers going on, Green, because I haven't seen it yet either. So I can't say anything about.
And I won't mean.
All I know is that I heard it's the best Marvel movie made. Now I'm dying to see it, and I've decided I want to go to the theater. Peach and I, we want to go out for dinner, and we want to go to the theater to see it. We're going to go to the not IMAX, but the Dolby Stereo.
So you're electing to swim in coronavirus plumes.
Yes.
Well, let me know which place you're going, because it closed. It was here in my local theater, but it's not anymore. And I want to see it a little more time again before it leaves the theaters for good.
Oh no! So okay,
I'm gonna see it in the cinema, but what I'm going to do now that the Christmas break is over and the kids are going back to school, I'm hoping if I go like at 11:30 or something on a Monday or Tuesday morning,
Right.
that there won't be anybody in a cinema.
And this is what's great now about pre-assigned seats. Like Suzanne and I went to see the new Kingsman movie yesterday, and we were literally there were us and there were literally 3 other people, and they were like far apart from us. So when I picked our seats, we were the only ones that are gonna be there, and so it was great because it was nobody there. So I'm like, all right, well, at least we're not sitting in.
So, if and when Peach and I go, it'll be the AMC theaters in Rockaway. So now I have to check and see if it's still there. If it's not still there, I'm going to be shocked to someone. And number 2, have you ever gone to the Dolby Theater?
No.
It's Dolby Sound, and it's a recliner that you get, like a Lazy Boy. It's kind of like Mike's chair there.
Yeah,
and the sound is right in the seat. And every time there's like a lot of action and stuff, the chair shakes. It's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Well, I'm so old, right, that I remember
any other.
I'm so old, right, that I remember when I went to see the movie Earthquake starring Charlton Heston. I went to see it in a movie that had Sensurround, and basically that meant they had these massive woofers that just rumbled to make your seat shake like you were having an earthquake during the earthquake. I mean, that's high tech for 1972. Listen, Michael, you need to contribute because I want to end the show. So say some really important and smart shit right now.
Looking at Trump's event yesterday, I would call it a super spreader event. Thousands of people showed up, and they're likely not vaccinated, and that really scared me. But in the past week, the trend has continued in the hundreds of people that I see a week online just like this. And I don't break the confidence of my clients lightly at all. Ethics is very important to me. But I will say that there's an event going on in Denver right now called the National Western Stock Show. And many of my clients that picked up COVID went to that event. And it's worse than the Trump event because you just imagine there's a lot of booths where people can buy things and look at leather and candles and all sorts of like Western apparel, and they're going through this place just walking back and forth like a mall, only like tighter packed.
Right.
The same people, the vendors, are there day after day, and they have that same mindset of, well, it doesn't matter if I get it because everyone's going to get it anyway. So I can still man my booth while I'm sick, right? So they're spreading it to everyone pretty much intentionally. They have this mindset of, well, if everyone gets it, then we'll all be immune.
And we don't even know if that's true. That's the thing that bugs me. I hear that all the time. Well, if I get it, then I'll be immune.
I can tell you that it's not true because I have clients that have gotten it 3 times now.
Wow.
Gotten COVID 3 times.
Well, and that's the thing. You figure with all the variants too. Raven, just on back to your thing with Spider-Man, it'll be in Rockaway at least until the 27th of January. It's not listed past that, but I was just checking. Rockaway has it till the 27th at least.
And Green Machine saying in the chat, let them die. I don't want to see anyone die, especially because of misinformation. Right. These aren't bad people; they're just very misled.
As of it was either yesterday or the day before Friday. I think it was Friday. As of Friday, the trend in some of the places that Omicron hit first, the trend is that hospitalizations and cases are dropping. So,
yeah. Now here's one thing though, Mike. I want to say about just bad information. At a certain point, I mean, good information has been out for a long time. At a certain point, people have to take responsibility for the fact that they purposely have siloed themselves from the good information, and because they don't want to believe it and they want to believe the bad information. So for those people, I have compassion for their families, but I really don't have any compassion for them.
I still do, but I see it as like the information that we've gotten out there can't get past the fundamentals, that they have no ability to search out and find good information. Yeah, they have no idea of how to consume information. That's why we are where we are.
Well, that's true. But they also, the same thing, for the same reason, they're also causing harm across the board in our society because it's the same people. You know that. It's the same fucking people. and I'm just tired of them. I'm just fucking tired because we try and we try, and they refuse to. They make this information silo, and they'd rather listen to Alex Jones or whatever other wackaloon that comes along. And at a certain point, I'm gonna say, all right, fine, let attrition take you, and then society gets better as they die. It does. I'm sorry, but it does.
Listen, friends, I think we should wrap up the show so we can have a little chat afterwards. Because my 4 hour time, I'm trying to keep my time limit, my personal time limit down to 4 hours here. So anyway, so I would like to thank everybody in the chat for participating in good spirits. And I also thank you all as well. Special thanks go out to Joe and Raven, because I wasn't sure if you're going to be here this week. Special thanks as well to Brian, because I'm never sure if you're going to be here because the hours are so unfriendly for you. And special thanks for Michael, because you made it even though your team lost, and you still faced the heat of the approbation you knew you were going to get from Vegas. So well done.
Yeah, I know. He's still there going neener in the chat.
Well, I don't care about football, but two, as a lifelong Mets fan, I know the feeling. So I have sympathy and compassion for what you might feel right now.
A lifelong Mets fan? Wow. The only other Mets fan I've ever even heard of was Archie Bunker, and he's not even a real person.
There's lots of us. There's lots of us. We're all fools, but we exist.
Anyway, okay, so listen, thanks everybody in the chat. Thanks everybody on the screen. Say goodbye, and I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast and look forward to seeing you all back on Saturday night as usual next week, and hopefully forevermore. And I will be back in sunny